the sunset, the day is ending. Let that yawn out. There's no pretending.
If she dies, America dies.
Sam, if we don't all come together again, humanity will not survive.
Everything I touch, I lose.
What is Death Stranding? In the build-up towards this game's release, I posited the question multiple times. Trailers seemed eager to reveal scenes from the story, divorced of context, but they never revealed the game's true nature. Even when we did eventually see snippets and sneak peeks containing gameplay, I still scratched my head. What is Death Stranding? Death Stranding is a game about delivering packages. Death Stranding is a game about walking. Death Stranding is a game about nihilism. Death Stranding is a game about rebuilding America. Death Stranding is a game about Norman Reedus and his funky fetus. Death Stranding is a game about the life experience through the eyes of Hideo Kojima. Death Stranding is a video game released in November of 2019. Originally exclusive for the PlayStation 4, eventually ported for the PC and PlayStation 5, along with special director's cut versions that mostly added additional content and cleaned up a lot of the more tedious aspects of the moment-to-moment gameplay. But when I really attempt to explain it further than that, I struggle. What is it? What is Death Stranding? I have tried for many years to attempt to put into words my feelings for Death Stranding, but I have always found myself unable to truly parse through it all. It feels like, despite being a simple game with a rather simple appearance from the outset, the more I poke at it and unravel each layer, the more I find to discuss. I don't believe that it's the greatest video game of our time. I barely even think I enjoy all that the plot provides. I dare to say that I don't even necessarily believe that it's a fun game. I certainly know that it's not even my favorite Kojima game, but that's what it isn't. What is it? Despite all that it isn't, I find it rather difficult to deny this fact. It is, without question, art. And of the many pieces of art I love to sing the praises of in the video game world, it's one of the strongest in a way that continues to baffle many. I mean, God knows, I've tried to explain it. I have typed this script a dozen times since 2019. I have found myself frustrated with how I can so easily forge paragraph after paragraph of deconstruction and still find myself wanting. As if I expect that if I write a few more paragraphs, I'll finally find the words. I'll finally manage to find a way to properly convey why it is that Death Stranding lingers in the back of my mind every single day. Maybe if I put it in the right words, those of you who played it and put it down will finally relate to those of us who enjoy it. If I find those words, perhaps they can explain why I enjoy it, and yet am so slow to sing its praises. Explain to me, words on the page, why I am so eager to believe I love this game, yet so hesitant to suggest it to someone. Why am I not telling everyone how much I love this game? After 5 years of attempts, this is my final one. I assure you, no matter the length of this video, I am giving you the chopped up and digestible version of what I want to say. This is going to be a Frankenstein's monster of a script made out of the many desperate struggles to overturn every leaf and find what this game is. All that it is, all that it isn't, all that it means to be, and what you will find is, by the end, I will still find myself wanting to say more. I'm the hairiest hair, and that is the power this game has. The power to drive a man to create this video before you. This is an exhaustive breakdown of one of the strangest, surrealist, most satisfying games to ever enter my line of sight. This is my attempt to understand what is Death Stranding. To even begin on this journey, we need to settle into a little groove here. As much as I'd like to just press play and allow it to carry us along, I believe that my appreciation for Death Stranding is not as simple as that. Many times in the world of fiction, it can actually become immensely inviting to understand the motivations behind a creation and to delve into the ins and outs of why something exists. Because playing Death Stranding cold turkey is certainly one way to experience the game. However, that is not my experience of it. As much as I would love to be able to walk walk into any experience blind, Death Stranding is not one of those experiences. As such, part of me can't help but believe that this does play a role in my overall appreciation for the game, and for that reason, I feel obliged to take your hand and not just walk you through this journey, but to also over-explain each step. Death Stranding is not a simple game where you boot it up, play a few fleeting moments, feel satisfaction, and move on. It is something slower, more demanding, and just as eager to over-explain itself. Not just for the sake of expelling noise, but instead to ease you into an understanding, to spark something in you, to encourage you to meet it on its level. For that reason, we are going to adopt a similar pace as we plod through this path to understanding. Our first stop on this parade of preamble is to start at the all too important beginning. Strap in, we're already about to face a steep incline as I open the floodgates of... It's difficult, maybe close to impossible, to discuss a game like this without at least gently touching on its creator. Without that vital piece of understanding, you threaten to miss a lot of context going forward. So, allow me this moment to talk to you about the main man behind the world of Death Stranding. Well known, well respected, and many times overcredited, the genius behind the curtain is one Hideo Kojima. Kojima is, somehow, bizarrely unique in his position in the world of video games. There are heads of companies, there are faces to brands, there are individuals lobbied with the success and failures of their studios. But not one of them is granted quite the same level of abundant praise and admiration that Kojima has accumulated over the years. His level of auteur grew with the creation of each Metal Gear game, assisted by self-inserts, references to reality, and other goofy things that feel so creatively unique to Kojima and his team. The story of Kojima would get a dramatic twist, however, when Metal Gear's publisher and rights holder, Konami, would push Kojima out the door in a spectacle most viewed as obscenely vindictive and unfair. The breakup was messy, the motivations were repulsive.
We need money! Convenient money!
And it's one of those situations where, if you were tuned into the ongoing news at the time, you've likely never really forgotten the taste it left in your mouth. It wasn't like a niche topic either. Every gaming news publication took to signal boosting the dramatic turn of events. It was likely profitable to do so because of how many video game enjoyers liked Kojima and hated the blatant, money-grubbing tactics of companies like Konami. Once known for making iconic titles and genuine attempts at art, now satisfied with making that quick and easy gambling money on pachinko machines and the scummy practices of mobile gaming. Ripped away from the metaphorical child he had raised up for so many reluctant years, Kojima's story, in the eyes of the public, shifted from a man on top of the industry to that of a victim to its cruelty. What followed was a year of near silence. As the silence grew, so too did the worries. And those fears weren't helped when Konami released Metal Gear Survive, an uninspired spin-off game ditching the political subterfuge of MGS5 and instead using its advanced engine to create a hollow zombie survival game several years beyond that being a hot gaming interest. The game reads as more of a milking of assets and a reach for cheap popularity than the actual work of passion that the average Metal Gear game possesses. Regardless of the game's quality or lack thereof, Survive felt like a potential writing on the wall. Metal Gear was going to move on without Kojima at the helm. During that near year of silence, Kojima made moves in the shadows, emerging at Sony's E3 conference in 2016 with the announcement of a lifetime, a moment that felt like a rebellious declaration as he unveiled a bizarre, intriguing video game trailer scored with Low Roar's song titled I'll Keep Coming, not only announcing his return to video games, but also emphatically putting an exclamation point on the end of the sentence.
Hello everyone, I'm back.
It's no stretch to say that Kojima's return to the gaming public and his unveiling of Death Stranding was one of the most exciting moments I've ever experienced in the world of video games. Not like hopping up and down in my chair exciting, but like the sort of excited that births an uncontrollable smile on your face and a warmth in your chest. A reminder that, oh yeah, I do have a functioning organ in my chest, and I also do like video games. Death Stranding was, and still kind of is, without question, my most anticipated game ever. Of all time. My relationship with Kojima's previous juggernaut of works, the Metal Gear Solid franchise, is bizarre to say the least, but that's a beast for another day. and I do mean another day. Regardless of its bizarre nature, Metal Gear and I have a good relationship. So good that I still consider Metal Gear Solid as my favorite video game series ever. Of all time. While I definitely wouldn't classify myself as a Kojima fanboy, one who holds him up as a deity who can do no wrong, thinking he planned out every small detail of his works, I do have a massive amount of respect for him and think that he brings an undeniably unique and fresh outlook to the world of video games. And even though some people online want to claim that it's actually the people he surrounds himself with that are doing the hard work to make him seem so amazing, well, then he must be real smart to have picked those people, because they're doing an amazing job. But also, I don't really buy that. I think there's just too many stories from too many celebrities that meet him and then walk away from the experience impressed by his mind and creativity. And in my analysis of him, those are the parts I'm latched onto. He's a weirdo, but he feels like the kind of weirdo I'd never really get sick of talking to, you know? Kojima's track record has always been consistent in trying to push the landscape of gaming down a route of being more like the horizons of the movie genre that he loves so dearly. However, what he brings to the table so very often doesn't feel like a sort of betrayal to the gaming medium, but instead an expansion to its limitations. While there are other auteurs of the video game world that hold a similar ambition for making games more akin to movies, Kojima consistently succeeds where they often fail by understanding and respecting the balancing act between movie and game, allowing his vision to translate in ways that no Quantic Dream game could ever hope to achieve. Kojima's works aren't just satisfied with being a video game. They often try to stretch the definition in ways both subtle and overt. If you have never experienced a Kojima-style joint, then you may not be able to understand the mouth-watering fascination fans have for anything this man creates. But if we were to narrow it down to a few simple concepts that put Kojima head and shoulders above his video game contemporaries, I believe that it's these. Number 1, humor and creativity. Number 2, meta/self-awareness. And 3, attention to detail. These are all desperately important to keep in mind as we continue throughout this entire video, as they are not only the core factors that make up every Kojima game. To me, they are the foundations that Death Stranding is built upon. So, in order for us to properly navigate this game, let's briefly break each one down so that you can understand where they come into play going forward. Humor and creativity. Kojima's sense of humor is an interesting aspect to hone in on. To the uninitiated, Metal Gear is a franchise that takes itself very, very seriously. Its factoids and interspersed relationship with real-world history provide evidence to the seriousness the series holds. When watching a handful of cutscenes that stretch into the hours, as characters wax philosophical and shed tears over their past trauma, it'd be easy to think that that is all Metal Gear is. However, where MGS usually obtains its anaconda hold over its audience is with its complexity not through details, but through emotions. Because not only are these games often smart and purposeful, they're also really dumb and nonsensical.
What are you? What the?
You're a man?
Each game contains strange references and running jokes, moai heads, and bikini babes on posters. Each game also contains within itself a level of absurdism that no self-respecting American tale would include, such as a main character who gets peed on, or codec calls discussing at length concepts like Godzilla's historical significance. These moments, when isolated, could just be any average, everyday funsies. But when every game Kojima touches contains such a similar undercurrent of snickering, it begins to lead a trail back to the man himself. In Death Stranding, this sense of humor extends to urination again, but this time, a digital mushroom pops up where the player pees. If more players pee in this spot, the mushrooms multiply. In one random instance, Sam Bridges, a very somber and serious protagonist who I'll get into later, just scratches a record belonging to a comatose companion on his way out the door for literally no reason. Moments like these litter Kojima's games, but rather than making them feel clustered or unfocused, they feel so much more personal, like as if the story you're experiencing is truly that being told by a person you can relate to, just a guy playing with his action figures. His humor is far and away outdone, though, by his creativity. Kojima seems to be the kind of person to walk into a room and have 100 ideas spawn from a movie he saw last night, where some games like Cyberpunk fell behind and suffered from an abundance abundance of ideas. Where David Cage's stories derail into nonsense because he has to include one more stolen idea, Kojima's games feel deeper because of it. Metal Gear Solid 5, for example, is filled to bursting with creativity. Small details that really make you believe that someone on the team asked if they could do something, and someone else on the team ensured that it could happen. At the beginning of production for Metal Gear Solid 2, Kojima provided his crew with idea journals, in which they would, every day, write down one idea that could be put into the game. When playing MGS2, you can tell that many of these incredibly simple ideas made it in. On the scale of a player, it's refreshing to not only be rewarded for your own creativity, but to also know that someone on the development side of things must have had a similar thought. This encouragement through creativity extends to other aspects of the games Kojima makes. Like, who the hell thinks to take a game about a Cold War conflict with heavy spy imagery and real-world accurate concepts, uniforms, guns, and vehicles, and then throws in an enemy who controls bees? And he's not even the craziest character in that game. Kojima, above all, has style. That's his charm. His works can balance the act of being everything it needs to be, and then some. And the best part is that he knows it. Meta/self-awareness. Kojima doesn't just insert a psychic into a spy thriller game with political betrayals left and right in a way that feels oddly natural. Somehow, this psychic is also made to do the most immersion-shattering thing possible in a video game, and yet, this action only enhances the experience tenfold. Psycho Mantis in MGS1 can read your memory card. He can tell you, the player, that he knows things about you. During his boss fight, he can cut the screen to black with a little green lettered Hideo in the top right corner, intended to directly mimic the video setting that used to display on television sets of the time. He can begin to frustrate players the way he doesn't seem to take damage, avoiding all your attacks. Because like I said, he's reading you, the player. He has this omnipotence that you must overcome. The easiest and most common way to defeat him is by switching the controller to the second player port so that he can no longer read your button inputs. In reality, there may be nothing more shattering to the fourth wall than the Psycho Mantis boss fight. Yet somehow, it still remains all too engaging. Every Metal Gear Solid game has a moment or many moments like this one. A period where everything is kind of aware of what it is. Just as well, I'd argue that over the years, Kojima himself has allowed this self-awareness to slip into his own personality. Throughout his tenure, Kojima has toyed with his fans. He has made more than one fake studio, pretended to be different people. He has worn a mask of fake bandages. He has tried to hide games in plain sight. Even if you narrow the scope and continue looking exclusively at the games themselves, it's still hard to ignore just how self-aware the whole experience is. Metal Gear Solid 2 is a game that directly points at its predecessors, referencing it as a game that the new protagonist, Raiden, has experienced in a simulation. Raiden isn't just some new guy that fans initially hated. He was a character who was seemingly made to be an uncomfortable change from the previous protagonist, both in the story and in the opinion of the audience. When that sour opinion bubbled over and became a major talking point of the second game, the third included cheeky references to mock the controversial protagonist. In less complicated terms, look at it like this. Kojima knows what he is doing, and he's not afraid to poke fun at it and be very self-aware, but his boundary breaks aren't just for the sake of a laugh, it's also there to really make you think in ways few other games have ever been able to pull off quite as well. Because sometimes when a game or other work of fiction decides to lean towards the camera and give a little wink, it can be jarring, uncalled for, disturbing.
Some folks have a strange idea of entertainment.
When Kojima's works have a fourth wall break, it's a wink and a gesture to join in. Perhaps this is what makes so many of these moments so legendary in the scope of the gaming landscape, and why so many, even those with the most serious of mugs, still reflect high praise and opinions over it. Kojima doesn't just shatter the fourth wall, he implies that there is no fourth wall. You, as a player, as a fan, as an observer, are invited to be a character in this reality. Thus, when Kojima tweets something strange and cryptic, it's dissected and analyzed. When a new trailer drops, everyone clambers to read more into every scene. When a game winks at the camera, the onlooker becomes a participant. Through this tactic, Kojima has garnered a fan culture that surrounds him in everything he does. He is expected to say something incredible, do something unexpected. And that's perhaps what keeps fans so fascinated with Kojima's body of work. It feels like art that ebbs and flows into our world and back into itself in this monstrous manner that allows it to be picked apart piece by piece. Yet, this next degree of praise might be what puts his previous work so high on the proverbial pedestal. Most times, these works contain enough within them to satisfy even the most hungry of video game detectives. Attention to detail. Details are important. They are unquestionably what makes up your favorite parts of your favorite stories. However, in the world of games, details can seem secondary, almost unnecessary. That isn't to claim that they go unappreciated or shouldn't be included, just that sometimes they could be skipped over and no one would ever notice their absence. Cutting corners in video game development is an expectation. There's something kind of jarring in gaming when you enter a room that's completely empty. No items, no purpose. You almost wonder why it was even modeled, why time was spent programming its existence. At least that's what my brain has been conditioned to think. Digital worlds are crafted with purpose. Elements which do not serve that purpose are secondary. Despite this mentality being the established norm of development, details in games are important. They flesh out a world to an insane degree. When a game contains them, it takes an experience from simply being entertainment to being that of an alternate reality, one that we can immerse ourselves in and inhabit. Details make games feel real, and yet they're not really something we expect from every game. On the flip side, a Kojima joint is typically packed to the brim with little details, likely due to activities like the aforementioned idea journals in Metal Gear Solid 2. Raiden's adventure is sprinkled with these small moments, these finer details that the average player would completely glance over. For example, in Metal Gear Solid 2, there's a parrot squawking and repeating lines from its owner and others. In the same room, Raiden obtains a device that can help him listen for distant or quiet sounds. This device needs to be used to locate a specific character on the floor just above where you find it. When you think you've found that character, you must press a button to make Raiden say, "You must be Ames." This is the only time in the game the device has a direct usage. It's also the only time Raiden has a reason to say these or any words upon button press. Despite this, these two near completely unrelated events have an interaction that the player can manipulate. When you pick up the directional mic next to the parrot, you can use the device to have Raiden speak to our feathered friend. To do so safely, you will need to eliminate all hostiles in the area. If you put yourself through this endeavor, you are shockingly rewarded. The parrot will add this phrase to its list of voice lines it repeats over and over, but only after a player presses the button to make Raiden speak this quote several times in front of it.
"You must be Ames. You must be Ames."
How in the world someone discovered this is one thing, but let's not forget the developer side of things. There is no point to this little detail. Like, think about it. Time, effort, money went into something this small, something that would be considered completely normal if it were absent entirely. And that's just me pointing at one small aspect of one single game. Every game after Sons of Liberty is filled with an absurd amount of these carefully placed concepts. More than Easter eggs, I'm talking bona fide tiny grains of ideas you didn't expect. The man has trained his audience to pay attention to details, not just in the game, but in those meta-contextual moments I mentioned before. When Kojima, under an alias, revealed the Phantom Pain, trying to pretend it had no relation to Metal Gear whatsoever, the fans tore it apart and quickly found the missing part of the logo. When Kojima, again under an alias, put out PT, the playable teaser for an unannounced Silent Hills project co-created with Guillermo del Toro, starring Norman Reedus, it was put out there with the clear idea of being a nigh unsolvable mystery full of strange details that no one in their right mind should ever be able to discern. And yet fans solved the puzzles and uncovered the truth in a shockingly brief amount of time. So, of course, when the moment arose, trailers for Death Stranding were broken down and eaten up. With such an immense reputation, Kojima's next major project was built upon that of great expectation. After the many years of being a standout creator in the video game industry, whatever Kojima was going to make next, free from the shackles of his constraining former parent's company, was surely going to be something even more groundbreaking than all his previous works put together. So, with expectations set, fans awaited eagerly. What wonders would Kojima deliver unto the video game world? The opening moments of any experience are the most important moments. In a person-to-person confrontation, it's a firm and confident handshake paired with a considerate attire. Perhaps a strong opening line to lighten the mood in the room. For the realm of visual storytelling, it could be a tense, intriguing scene to draw the audience in with curiosity, an explosion, a bang, or maybe a moment of tragedy just before a flashback. However one wishes to begin, intention must remain at the forefront. Death Stranding, more than most games, reveals plenty in terms of tone within its first few opening moments. Narration over a black screen from our main character, played by gruff-vocaled celebrity Norman Reedus. Then we see our world. Opening shots of still, desolate beauty, greens, grays, and blacks. Saturation tuned just enough to make our human eyes feel a sense of tourist voyeurism. And, of course, the title card. Death Stranding. White text on white shadowed clouds, the ominous foreboding of being underlined by an upside-down rainbow. At first, maybe you won't latch on to the image, but eventually you may understand its importance. It is the symbol of our current reality, a world flipped on its head, defying nature itself. However, none of the visuals here and beyond could truly captivate an audience without the heavy lifting achieved by the musical sounds provided by the Icelandic band Low Roar. Admittedly, Death Stranding likely couldn't have propelled itself into superstardom without Low Roar. It very well may not have existed without them. What can be confirmed without doubt is that it isn't Death Stranding without the sound they provide. Here, in the introduction to Death Stranding, that is put to the test and exceedingly proven. The music, bizarrely indescribable, elevates all beauty, yet also Low Roar's tunes consistently hold an air of foreboding. Lingering over every beautiful sound rests a heavy yet subtle bass. As much as the scenery is truly beyond words in its spectacle, a storm looms overhead. This is the marriage provided not only in this intro, but throughout all of Death Stranding. I truly am not able to explain to you how mind-shattering it will become for us to say that one thing just fits into another, like hand in glove. It is enough to make you think that this world was made for this music, or that the music was made for this world. Neither are necessarily the case, yet somehow they operate in perfect tandem. The tone set in this opening portion is consistent with the rest of Death Stranding's general vibe. The game will, at times, fail to live up to the serenity of this cutscene. However, the opening effects are, nonetheless, poignant. A foreboding calmness. All is beautiful, and still, just beyond that beauty, lurks danger, and something on the horizon to interrupt that stillness. Despite appearances, this is America, and while it is truly one of the most beautiful, awe-inspiring images of America to exist, there's that little twinge of depressing sadness once you realize the severity of this world's changes. What we have lost, devoid of humans and their structures, left with an eerily empty natural void, unrecognizable when compared to our present. This hollowness is paired with most of the game's themes. It's for this reason I believe that this hollow feeling the game initially gives you is with very specific intent. Death Stranding is full of messages. By the end of your journey through the game, you may beg for it to stop attempting to hammer these messages into your skull, but here in the simplest form, Death Stranding attempts to speak to you more subtly. This hollow, empty land is our first encounter, our initial feeling, both in its beauty and its air of hopelessness. Death Stranding primes you to philosophically align yourself with its main character, Sam Porter Bridges. Sam doesn't really have much going for him, but he does represent a very important outlook on life that will conflict with most characters in the story to come. The opening of Death Stranding and Sam's pessimistic viewpoint opened the door for me to delve into the realm of a little thing called... Alright, it's time for that thing. It's time for that thing that every video essay watcher loves. Oxford Languages describes nihilism as a noun, the rejection of all religious and moral principles in the belief that life is meaningless. In a more complex way, nihilism is a philosophy adopted by plenty of people all over the planet. An idea derived from looking at the world around us and all of its functions in the universe, eventually coming to the conclusion that it is all completely pointless. Life is is not the creation of some super entity with intention. We are a cosmic coincidence, and no matter what we do, all that we hold dear will eventually turn to dust. Raise your hand if you've had a brush with this thought at least once in your life. It's definitely not an uncommon one. You can certainly add my name to the list of those who fall under nihilism. I'll get into my own personal relationship with it in a moment, but for now, let's focus on nihilism in regards to Death Stranding. The world of Death Stranding is yet another post-apocalyptic setting. This time, however, instead of nukes or natural disasters, the planet has been affected by that of the supernatural. The titular Death Stranding is a phenomenon that initially ravaged the world without any prior knowledge or warning. The world of the living and the afterlife are two separate areas, and between them is a purgatory, the beach. However, due to some wacky circumstances, the ability for souls to just cross back into the land of the living became pretty easy to do. This led to explosions, simultaneous detonations, all around the planet as our world's matter came in contact with the other side's antimatter. After the explosions came chiralium, an element not natural to our world that began to completely screw everything up. Imagine waking up tomorrow and just outside your door are craters where your friends used to live. You hop online only to realize there is no online. There is no internet, no phone service, no satellite coverage, nothing. Chiralium or death is all that remains. In short, the world was almost reset to zero in a very short amount of time. There's no real way to look at the situation and not see the bleakness of it. Humanity faces a completely unknown, mostly invisible enemy. America is ravaged and completely transformed, unrecognizable from its initial appearance. There's no longer any contact with anyone, whether they're on the opposite side of the planet or just down the road. Despite all this, our foray into this world is during a period where America has begun to recover. Despite all they've lost, there is now an abundance of humans who have retreated, living in underground bunkers, allowing the undead to take the surface. Despite the hopelessness, science and technology still rapidly develop, leading to new tech that takes advantage of the poor situation our characters find themselves in. The chiralium that traps them will shortly become their greatest tool. The rebuilding of America is happening. Slowly, painfully, the people have found their footing, mostly due to the efforts of a logistics company known as Bridges. To keep things brief, Bridges is the backbone of modern society. Structures, science, research, deliveries, everything. Bridges is trying their damnedest to keep the raft afloat, and from what we can tell, they're doing a great job of it. However, we don't take control of one of these optimistic Americans holding on to the idea of a rebuilt country. Instead, we are to see life through the eyes of Sam Porter Bridges. Sam is an incredible selection due to his worldview. His nihilism is posed as an obstacle in opposition to the members of Bridges, who are working relentlessly to rebuild something resembling a nation on top of the ruins left in the wake of the Death Stranding. He's not just grumpy and irritable, his punk attitude doesn't stop at telling the president,
You're the president of jack shit.
Sam is written with an extra dosage of layers. He's closed off, disconnected, distant, which impedes progress as he's the best chance this world has at reclaiming a fraction of what it lost. Sam, after losing his wife and unborn child, completely shuts down, committing his Sisyphean existence to the duties of being a porter. He delivers packages from one disconnected underground city to another. It's the perfect job for him. With people underground, you don't have to interact. With the world needing supplies to be traded and exchanged, your services are always required. With the nation devoid of surface dwellers, peace can be found. With the planet under a terrifying supernatural threat, a justifiable end could be waiting around every turn. At least it would be for the average person. When dancing with the devil in the pale moonlight, it can be easy to slip into this realm of reality, a world where you overcommit yourself to a job, a hobby, a vice, just for the sake of feeling numb to something. Pain, regret, tragedy, whatever your ailment, it is easy to look into the eyes of this emotional beast and come to the realization that nothing would be a better alternative. Happiness is difficult to achieve. Sadness is easy to slip into. In between these lies the pure buzz of emotional numbness, found in the deep trenches of distraction. Sam Porter Bridges, the man who delivers. Tirelessly, Sam commits himself to this isolated world of duty and doesn't take his eyes off of the ever-changing finish line for even a moment. To do this is better. To feel nothing is easier than to let the guard down, slow down, and get hurt again. finding meaning on the other side of meaningless. If I may insert myself into the narrative, this is where my personal perspective kicks in. At one low point in my life, the image of the world around me began to bleed away. What once seemed like a positive place where dreams were achievable and the wind would always be backing my sails now began to look much more bleak. I had managed to achieve nothing. With all of the artistic capabilities I possessed, I lacked anything portfolio-worthy to my name. With all of the intelligence my family had worked hard to foster, I had found myself uninterested in school. Despite my multitude of friends, all of which I had clung to since elementary, I realized quite quickly that at the end of the road, I was truthfully alone. No one really knew me. All of the joys of life were swept away, and the next thing I knew, I'm tossed into the fray. The quote-unquote real world awaited me. Taxes that no one explained, apartment hunting that I never knew could be so difficult, a corporate world that encourages selfishness, a political system that discourages empathy. All around, more and more, the world began to crush me emotionally. Eventually, I, like many others, came to a conclusion: life is meaningless. There's no point in raising my credit. There won't be any houses for me to buy. There's no point in shaving. Just gonna grow back anyways. There's no point in doing anything. I'm just gonna die at the end regardless. Misery, misery, misery. That is what I had chosen. For a long while, this was the trend, toiling away in the infinite sadness, searching for fleeting joys but finding no long-term satisfaction. Looping and looping in this meaningless existence. What can one do to escape the loop? Death Stranding, through its long-winded, detail-distracted narrative, reads to me as the answer this question poses. If life is truly without purpose, then that just means it is a blank space upon which we write our own meaning. Deliveries don't have to be just the numbing and monotonous task that they have been. They could be the drive, the purpose. If that's not enough of a motivator, maybe it's for those who are helped by said deliveries. Maybe it's for the time spent exploring the world, seeing unimaginable sights, or just the quality time you spend with your newfound friend, a baby in a jar. Perhaps purpose lies in the plight of assisting others along their journey in subtle ways, not for the sake of grandeur, but just to help share the load, to carry the burden together, to remember that you aren't alone, and to remind others of that fact. By filling this blank and rediscovering purpose, we find ourselves at our next philosophical stop: optimistic nihilism. Yet simultaneously, by looking at an individual robbed of grand purpose and thrown into the fray of the quote-unquote real world, we also arrive at our next reflection. For what is the video game Death Stranding if not a dark reflection of the mind of Kojima himself? For those keeping track, yes, we are still in the preamble. And yes, we did already talk about Kojima. However, what I didn't talk about was the specific situations leading up to this game's creation. Say what you want about art, but real creativity comes from real moments in the lives of real creators. And this situation, more than most, directly informs the game that follows. This section perhaps has the potential to diverge interested parties. Either you find this kind of behind-the-scenes stuff fascinating, or you find it unnecessary. Nevertheless, to properly convey my personal fascination with this game, we must be approaching it with the same understanding, so let me bend your ear for a moment and take you further back in the timeline. In 2015, Kojima and the publisher he had been working alongside since 1986 had a massive breakup, a clash of ideologies. Kojima, the artistic visionary, versus the high-profit demanding executives of Konami. The fallout was intense. The effects on Metal Gear Solid 5 were obvious. As Kojima departed, many of us feared we had just seen the end of the illustrious career of a unique mind in the gaming landscape. However, Kojima took his time away to refocus and formulate. After an understandable stint of depression, being ostracized from the very company he had helped in putting on the map, Kojima traveled. On these travels, he reconnected, restructured, rebuilt, eventually re-emerging with not just a company, but an incredibly legendary trailer. More interesting than the confusing anomaly of this trailer, and more exciting than the reaction Kojima's return received, is the pieces that fit in to make this game possible. Through his connection and friendship with Guillermo del Toro, Kojima was able to get Norman Reedus on board the previous project, Silent Hills. Del Toro called Norman Reedus himself and told him that someone named Kojima would be giving him a call soon. Del Toro stressed that no matter what the man says, Reedus should say yes. Through one connection foundation, another is formed. The story of Silent Hills is its own interesting mystery, but needless to say, Silent Hills never even got past the pre-production stage. I don't even know that it got into the pre-production stage. Despite that game's absence, the newly formed connection would remain in the back pocket until the right time came. Director of the film Drive, Nicholas Winding Refn, also found himself fast friends with Kojima after the two met up and had dinner together. Realizing the two were philosophically similar, they remained in constant contact, even traveling the world together. On one particular journey to Iceland, Kojima would discover many inspirations, such as the inspiration for a massive majority of Death Stranding's environmental visuals. Black sand, mossy mountains, lush greens. His trip would be ever highlighted by a chance hearing of wondrous local music, a sound so illustrious Kojima immediately purchased the full album. Naturally, this is what leads us to the inclusion of the iconic soundtrack of Low Roar's creation and its eventual implementation into Death Stranding. Through Refn, Kojima would also get in contact with Mads Mikkelsen, another world-renowned actor high up on Kojima's list of favorites. Mikkelsen was apparently cautious to accept an invitation into the video game fold until his son heard the name behind it. Kojima, forget every film you've been in. This is the coolest thing you could ever do. But with Kojima flat on his rear after being pushed out of the Konami conglomerate, putting together a new game with a brand new studio wasn't going to be easy. Kojima was 53 years old, with very little to his name. Not in terms of money, credit, or anything else resembling that of results, but instead, according to Kojima, due to him no longer having connections to Konami, it wasn't going to be possible for him to acquire a loan from the bank large enough to put even the beginnings of his idea together. Fate, however, plays its hand once more. It was by pure chance that at the biggest bank in Japan lay one employee who was a massive fan of Kojima's. He rushed to assure Kojima got his financing, this random stranger putting his neck on the line for the dream to come true. Then, when it was time to house this new studio, the same event occurred once more. A fan found within a landlord was able to assist in providing the structure. The snowball kept rolling from there. The story goes that Kojima had his groundwork and idea for a game laid out, pitching to publishers, asking them to help fund the project, but refusing to elaborate on what the game was. He was attempting to make the insane play of asking companies to risk it all and bet on him. No one would be that crazy. No one would just fund a game without knowing what the game was. And yet, as insane as it is, Sony, putting full, unconditional faith in Kojima, swooped in and struck a partnership deal with the newly founded Kojima Productions. Guerrilla Games, makers of Horizon Zero Dawn, provided the code to their Decima engine, the foundations for a video game, as a gift. No conditions. Asking for nothing in return. This act of kindness was given to Kojima Productions, who took it, ran with it, and in return gave notes back to Guerrilla Games. The two working in unison to make their completely separate games better and better through complete cooperation and communication. Norman and Del Toro, Nicholas Winding Refn, Low Roar, Mads Mikkelsen, PlayStation's partnership, the Decima engine being gifted, countless others, and finally us, the gaming populace. One by one, Kojima reconnected with everyone in a way that perfectly mirrors what would become the grand idea and message of Death Stranding. Mind you, this tale is told by Kojima himself, fragmented over countless interviews and articles. Eventually, the story was even corralled into a documentary. This makes it easy to form a layer of skepticism over the strange mirrored implications. It's almost spooky that the fiction and reality are this intimately tied to each other. However, as a creative, I can see it. I've been there. I know what it's like. But even if I didn't have that experience, there is part of me that simply chooses to believe the story. Is it not better that way? A journey that began as a depressing divorce story slowly found its way into that of a tale of tenacious success. Through the bonds that we share, when strengthened, we can do mighty things. This is one of the many, many themes at the heart of Death Stranding and what builds the emotional foundation of the road we are about to travel on. It took us a second, but we made it. It is time for us to get into the meat of this meal. All of that may seem like an excessive amount of preamble, but I assure you, this game's parts are just as interesting as its sum. More than most any game I've ever encountered, the story outside of its creation is just as interesting as the creation itself. But I can sit here and ramble on forever about these nebulous concepts without ever getting into the actual subject at hand, and I assure you, it is still a robust subject to tackle. So, with me starting to grow concerned that someone has been watching and doesn't even know what Death Stranding actually is, let's hurry up and talk about the video game proper. The opening, as described, sets our tone. Death Stranding takes place in a world beautifully malformed, nature slowly attempting to reclaim itself after the events of tragedy. The human world has been run underground, not only by the nasty supernatural creatures known as beached things, or BTs for short, but also to protect from nature's new hazardous addition, timefall. Timefall is rain, but whatever the rain touches is accelerated through time. Human skin, plant life, animals, structures. Once the rain makes contact with something, it returns to being harmless water, but that still leaves the world open to many risks on the surface. With contact sparse, civilizations remain holed up in their underground bunkers, keeping to themselves. Scattered and contactless, 3D printers can only do so much. The world relies on supply shipments for survival. Porters making deliveries. The porter of focus is the aforementioned protagonist, Sam Porter Bridges. In a series of events that rapidly unfold, we are introduced to the concept of timefall, BT, a woman we'll get to know as Fragile, and Sam's aphanphasmophobia, a fear of intimacy cranked up to 12. Touching the man is enough to set off an allergic reaction. Sam's consistent no-touch lifestyle is entirely justified, but nonetheless thrown into question throughout the story. Repeatedly, characters will reach for Sam, and every time, he will pull away. As Fragile departs and Sam wraps up on a delivery, a corpse disposal team rolls up. They've got a body that's starting to necrotize. If they don't get it to the furnace soon, it's gonna pop out a BT. If the BT attempts to reconvene with the corpse, it'll trigger a void out. Void outs are the giant explosions caused by matter and antimatter meeting, leaving behind a disastrous crater. Sam, conscripted into this job, accepts a contract to assist Bridges in this matter. He rolls with them for a stroll through BT-infested zones. As you can imagine, it doesn't go well. All hell breaks loose. The truck's driver swerves and tips the truck, flinging its occupants and trapping one underneath its weight. Sam, the most experienced of the crew, commands they remain quiet. They are deep in enemy territory.
Sam! Shut up. Don't even breathe.
Sam spots a curious man with sinister body language who assuredly will have no relevance to the plot later. The Bridges member that conscripted Sam, Igor, plugs himself into a BB unit, a bridge baby, a living device meant to assist this world's more mundane individuals with detecting BTs, though it's not very effective, both because of some kind of malfunction as well as being surrounded by BTs on all sides. With little time in terms of options, Igor plugs a bullet into his comrade as he's dragged away, tosses the BB aside, and then turns the gun on himself. The bullet misses, however, as Igor is yanked into the air, slowly hovering away from his weapon and towards an ominous figure in the distance. Igor stabs himself, attempting to end his life before the beast consumes him, but we can watch as he still kicks and grunts all the way into the being's gaping maw. All in all, the opening moments are gripping, tense, and confusing to newcomers. Exactly as intended. Igor is taken, a void out is triggered, consuming all life in the vicinity, including Sam. However, Sam is a repatriate, able to return to life with very little consequence other than a little stomach expulsion and an innocent handprint on his body. All the more, potentially explaining why a man so miserable still walks this realm. He has no choice. Returning to the world, somehow with BB in tow, Sam is taken back to Bridges HQ in Capital Knot City. We're introduced to Dead Man, whose physical likeness is that of Guillermo del Toro. Die Hard Man, portrayed by the talented Tommy Earl Jenkins. And most importantly, America's last president, Miss Bridget Strand, portrayed by the bionic woman herself, Lindsay Wagner. or Wagner if you're a Yank. On her deathbed, with mere moments to spare, the president seeks to speak to Sam one last time. Sam was once a member of the Strand family, brought into the fold, but not born of it. Bridget attempts to encourage Sam and usher him along the path of her mission to rebuild America. Sam declines this isn't his mission, implying there is more to the fallout between them than just loss or distance. We won't get to explore that too far as Bridget crosses the physical line. Falling out of her deathbed, Bridget insists on two things: that Sam must help Bridget with reconstruction now more than ever, and just the chance to touch him one last time. I love you, Sam. Unknown to Sam, this final touch was a sleight of hand, forcible confirmation on a contract for Sam to join Bridges in their endeavor. Bridget has passed on a contract to Sam, then she passes on herself. In this game, the main driving force of gameplay is deliveries. The role of a porter in this universe is to deliver the supplies that underground bunkers are unable to provide for themselves. Sometimes it is as simple as building materials, other times we are transporting artifacts with sentimental value. Or how about the nightmarish implications of a truckload of oxytocin to keep the underground inhabitants docile? As a porter, your job isn't to ask questions. You walk up to a terminal, select and accept an order, and then hit the road, heading from one destination to the next. When selecting an order, there is an absolute mountain of information you can look through. Plenty are handy, most are unnecessarily abundant. The weight of these orders are perhaps their most important factor. As a human, Sam can only port a certain amount of weight before it starts to weigh on him. For this reason, while it is certainly possible to accept as many orders as you can, it would be best to stop and assess the workload as well as your available resources. Taking on too much or too little work both run a sort of risk. Too much and you risk putting yourself in harm's way, putting packages in peril. Too little work accepted means that you leave an order behind, eventually having to return to accept it, leading to a loss of your personal time, energy, and resources. Neither are inherently the wrong way to play Death Stranding, but both require a certain adaptability from the player to find their own personal groove and tackle the game in a way they so choose. Upon arrival at the delivery drop location, another terminal awaits, where you input the completion of your current order. Here, you are judged by both the over-generous menu system as well as the holographic projection of the patient patron of your services. Your score is calculated based on factors such as cargo condition, delivery volume, and distance traveled, resulting in a letter grading for the mission. This score is also calculated into an overall player score that keeps track of your progress as a porter. Ranking up in your porter grade gives you access to plenty of invaluable upgrades to your person, such as more stamina and cargo capacity. The more you nail your services as a deliverer, the easier those deliveries get, married through both in-game mechanics as well as a player's ongoing familiarity with said systems. As time goes on and you find yourself more at ease with these systems, you may find yourself up for challenges, taking on more deliveries, more weight, getting comfortable, maybe too comfortable, taking on a load larger than your hubris can handle, then taking a tumble and ruining your cargo's condition. With the president dead, the corpse must be run to a furnace. Sam is the man for it, ranking your mother's corpse and along with it, the malfunctioning equipment that got Igor, that other guy, and all of the off-screen population of Central Knot City super murdered. Sam takes pause, however, realizing what exactly the equipment is. A bridge baby, still living in its orange-colored pod. Dead Man assures us it is just equipment, malfunctioning equipment at that. BBs are not able to survive outside of their pods and are usually only in service for a year or so. Sam, ever questioning of higher powers, hesitates. His hesitation takes just a moment too long as BTs surround the area. BTs are unable to be spotted by regular individuals. Those with a special mutation called Dooms are sometimes able to see them. However, our boy Sam can only sense them. Goosebumps, cold breath, sounds, and other subtleties. But if he were to risk it all, do what you doubly should not do as a Doom's Haver and plug into the other side via our available BB. A BB that, might I remind you, is uncooperative, leading to the deaths of many off-screen individuals. Now, then maybe, just maybe, Sam can slip through and make a break for it. Throughout all of Death Stranding, BTs will be encountered, terrifying entities taking the form of black shadowy particles. Unseen by most, these members of the Deathless Society from the other side will serve as this game's secondary or main threat. Regardless of their priority, they are a real hassle. Mechanically, players are encouraged to stealthily avoid detection from these BTs. Failure to do so can result in loss of cargo, loss of life, void out craters that litter and ruin your actual in-game map, and more rarely, a game over screen. I will say that as an avid stealth game enjoyer, there are presented problems with not just their use within the game, but the tools provided to deal with them. The Odredeck is a fun little flashlight beacon that flaps on your shoulder. When entering a BT zone, the Odredeck will activate. Just before that, Sam will react with a strong shiver. These, paired with the appearance of timefall, make it nigh impossible to accidentally stumble into a BT zone unaware. The Odredeck points in the direction of the nearest BT, slowly flapping when far, flapping faster when close, spinning and turning orange when a BT is alerted to your presence, and finally popping into a worried exclamation point and a directional arrow pointing towards danger once you are being pursued, soon to be snatched by one. The Odredeck truly contains all the capabilities necessary for an individual to completely cross through BT zones undetected. The final piece of the puzzle being the ability to hold your breath. Doing so causes BTs to lose your continued position, only able to detect where you were prior to holding your breath or making a commotion, operating on sound and disturbances for detection rather than sight. Just as you can barely sense them, they can barely sense Sam. It is important that I tell you that these mechanics, while occasionally frustrating, tedious, and sometimes bordering on boring, are all a player ever needs in order to interact with the gameplay presented by BTs. I should know, this is all I ever used, outside of a future tool added to the handcuffs, to get through the entirety of Death Stranding's slow BT areas. The slow plotting of pathways, the careful steps taken to maneuver around threats. Never was I detected, thus I never felt challenged. I never felt like I needed more options. I never explored the plethora of solutions to the BT problem that became available throughout the game. In future playthroughs, I realized there is much more to these mechanics than I initially understood. While all that I have mentioned before will remain unchanged, Death Stranding does slowly begin to provide the player with more and more capabilities of fighting back. Grenades made of Sam's piss, shit, blood, and gamer girl bathwater will serve as the basis for fighting equipment. Yet, as the game carries on, those rudimentary fighting tools will be upgraded to bola guns, capable of constricting opponents both physical and spiritual, blood guns, able to shoot blood-covered bullets, and guns, able to kill people if you, for some reason, ever wanted to do that, you psychopath. Using these, it is entirely possible to wipe out an entire zone of BTs, clearing them from a map permanently. But just like any step of the rebuilding process of America, it takes a lot of work, effort, patience, and resources. So whether you are bashing your head into the slow and stealthy approach, or you're attempting to blow every BT back to whence it came, your options are going to require something from you, and failure to perform in either path with careful perfection will result in a BT getting a hold of you. If they snatch you up, you'll drop your cargo as you're whisked away to an area nearby that's a little more open and clear. Here, you must fight one of the game's many bosses. Sounds terrifying. I assure you, it's not. The concept of a boss fight being possible at any moment should be a dramatic twist that encourages you to remain either vigilant or prepared, something that admittedly isn't easy to balance in Death Stranding's mechanics. After all, your back can only carry so much stuff, and weapons have an expiration point. No reloads, no repairs. Once they hit zero, they're garbage. Do you pack weapons and stay prepared, or do you save precious space for your precious cargo? In the initial playthrough, I was only caught once due to some goofy hijinks, just me testing the mechanics and the limits of their potential. Yet, in retrospect, I wish I had stocked up and faced every boss head on, because doing so is a sexy third option for dealing with our BT problem. You can avoid BTs like I did, keeping them ever present, but familiar and manageable. You could eliminate them one by one, slowly clearing out the map at the cost of some serious resources and an extreme devotion of time, or face down a boss. Upon defeat, the area is, for the most part, liberated of BTs, relieved of the current downpour of timefall, and in its place is an abundance of resources. Despite the options, I'd argue that the last choice might be the best one, not just because of its extreme change in the environment and its effectiveness, but because of its simplicity. Bosses in this game are, near across the board, laughably easy. They move slow, their attacks do not contain too much risk, and due to a mechanic I'll get into later, the threat of running out of supplies is minimal. I kept track. I was only hit by a boss's attack twice in my entire initial playthrough. Now, keep in mind, that's the required bosses rather than these roaming optional bosses, but still, it's not much of a difference mechanically. Their threat to difficulty is minimal. The only thing to fear is the time you sink into attempting to genocide the entirety of the beach thing's population. Regardless, even if you aren't up to facing these behemoths, just turn around and hightail it out of there. When entering a boss fight, BTs cover the ground in their black tar essence. Making it to the end of that zone of influence relieves you of the responsibility of eliminating the enemy, giving another option of ease in this experience. And unfortunately, this just means that the encouragement to engage with the game on its terms becomes strangely questionable. Initially, I never had an issue with any of this, but subsequent playthroughs have provided me with the observation of this game's problems. BTs feel threatening. The sound design is intense, the music is chilling, the sound of timefall creates this memorable sense of unease as you struggle to listen for sound cues informing you of danger. Over the course of the game proper, these areas only get more and more difficult. The hallways between BTs gets tighter and tighter. In my initial playthrough, where I never fought BTs, but instead snuck around all of them, this made for some incredibly slow and tedious, but still rewarding and incredibly engaging gameplay. I felt validated in my playstyle as the challenge began to ramp up and I kept up with its difficulties. However, on my second playthrough, the tedium began to overstay its welcome, and the list of solutions to the BT problem is so plentiful that it becomes difficult to ignore. After all, am I truly experiencing the game if I am actively ignoring the majority of its tools? Can I truly say I've had a full experience if there's still so much to try? Yet, no matter how much I tested out these alternate playstyles in subsequent playthroughs, I found myself unenthused. The weapons aren't bad, the tools are certainly useful, but something just never clicked for me. I can't ignore the fact that these BT sections should be where the game picks itself up and shows off its mix-up to the gameplay, a layer of excitement to break up the tedium. Instead, it ends up becoming a part I dread in a very unengaging way, a layer of tedium to top off a game of tedium. I don't think that it's anywhere near an outright failure, just that it's going to be an issue that everyone is going to tackle in their own way, and I guarantee many will have polarizing opinions, evident by my own mind representing both sides of this argument. Me of the stealthy past pitted against me of the complete experience present. Dare I say it, I liked this game better when it was slower, when I was on the back foot. I liked sneaking, I liked being careful, I liked being afraid. Once you put the gun in my hand, I question that fear. And while I think that's the point of Death Stranding, the slow overcoming of the unknown through innovation and experience, that doesn't mean that I enjoyed what that message does to the gameplay. Okay, editing hair here. There's actually a few things I got wrong, and very quickly I'd like to clarify, even though we're a bit too deep for me to rewrite everything. Doing it here will have to do. While my point still stands that fighting BTs is a reasonable alternative to crouch walking around them, there is one detail I misunderstood in my multiple playthroughs. Slowly clearing out an area is possible, though there is some debate on whether this is a permanent fix. When it most certainly isn't a permanent change is when you summon a boss. Defeating or leaving the area of a boss fight does clear the zone of timefall in BTs, however, the change is very temporary. I defeated a boss off camera only for the BTs to spawn in several minutes later. Mind you, I don't mean like they came back while I was away. No, they respawned while I was still hanging around in their territory. So if you're looking to clear the zone, you gotta do it the old-fashioned way. If you just want to zoom through a location and make it out the other side, it might be best to just make a break for it, occasionally taking out the handfuls of BTs in your way. That being said, my point still stands. This lack of difficulty starts to disrupt the balance of the game. The looming threat of BTs is thrown into question, and once you awaken to that reality, it's hard to go back to the old mindset. Sam finally makes it out of the BT-riddled furnace area and back to capital Knot City. He's called upon once more by the president? But did we not just burn the president's corpse? Die Hard Man ushers in the introduction of the new president of America.
This is the face of our new hope. Our new America.
Amelie.
Bridget's daughter, Amelie. It doesn't take much detective work to realize that, just like Bridget, Amelie is portrayed by Lindsay Wagner, yet youngified. The dialogue shared in this scene does very little to explain or calm the theory-forming sides of a player's mind. Sam and Amelie have a relationship of some sort, deeper than any other character we know of, excluding maybe his mysterious Polaroid wife. But what that relationship pertains is uncertain. Amelie comments on Sam's age. Sam observes her unchanging age. Her body can't age while it's on the beach. Oh, yes, that explains it. Except no, it doesn't. What are we talking about? Doesn't matter, we have more pressing concerns. Amelie has apparently been kidnapped by terrorists who love creating void outs and bad vibes, the homo demons. Sam stands his own during this conversation, insisting that none of this has anything to do with him. However, it's all a bit pointless. The metaphorical cuffs, as well as the very literal ones, are already on.
They think that America can only be rebuilt by force. By men who tell them what to do, who take away their freedom and put them in shackles.
What'd you put on me, huh? You know better than the demons.
The final mission from America's last president isn't over. Sam will journey west and provide the newly developed super internet, known as the Chiral Network, to cities all across America, uniting them and finishing the job Amelie and her team were unable to, all the while inching closer and closer to where the demons are holding Amelie. A distant journey with a helpless princess locked in a castle, waiting for rescue at the end. The video game classic formula is established. Yet by now, you understand that Death Stranding is often far from being a regular old video game. In the video game Death Stranding, there are a handful of ways that a player can expect to interact with the world around them. In terms of active, objective-based gameplay, there is one primary form of progress. Sam isn't called the man who delivers for nothing. Performing deliveries, obtaining a package from one place and manually delivering it to the next location is the main loop of this game. However, to describe it so simply is to imply that it is a simple job. It is not. Amongst the many things overly complicated in the world of Death Stranding, the one done with extreme intention is in regards to this, its most interactive mechanic. Before even embarking on a delivery, you will encounter the extreme overbearing presence of screens upon screens with an absolute plethora of information. Whether that information is vitally informative or unnecessarily stressful is dependent on you. Over the course of the game, your brain will, no doubt, perform a self-autopsy on the information, eventually overlooking the words and numbers that mean very little, and instead focusing on the portions that have actual weight on you and your future performance. Like, for example, the literal weight you will be applying to Sam's shoulders. Death Stranding is a game with a mostly reliable and in-depth weight, physics, and gravity system, taking into account how much weight you can carry, how much you are carrying, and how that weight is distributed on Sam's mortal frame is something that must be taken into deep consideration here in the planning phase, because the weight isn't just a way of pacing the player, ensuring they can only take a couple of orders at a time. The weight is important when it comes to the main thing Death Stranding is about. Walking. Walking and maneuvering around the environment from point A to point B is how deliveries get accomplished. That being said, to mark Death Stranding as a walking simulator would be to misunderstand an entire genre and discount this game's rather complex comparisons. When the label walking simulator is issued, it's typically in reference to an existing genre of modern games that are a rather simple and rudimentary experience. You walk, sometimes you can do a puzzle, read a note, do a small task. These experiences, however, are more rooted in their environment and the discovery of said environment. The actual walking in something the masses label as a walking simulator is nearly automatic. Holding forward is all it takes to make your character successfully move, occasionally needing to press an extra button or two to climb or interact. No, Death Stranding is certainly not that. In fact, perhaps it can be presented that it's the definition of what a walking walking simulator should be. If you have ever hiked, climbed something steep, or carried items a far distance, then you are aware of just how uncomfortably arduous the task is. Walking, for most of us, is simple. We tell our brain to walk and one foot just falls in front of the other. You don't feel these commands, they just happen. Holding something in your arms and walking is a new task entirely. While it becomes something more automatic and imperceptible, there's still a part of you that must retain the command to hold. Undoubtedly, I guarantee you can recall a time when you intended to hold something only to accidentally let it drop to the ground just out of neglect for your actions. The action feels automatic, but there's still a part of your mind that must remain aware. This is near perfectly embodied in Death Stranding's controls. Putting something on Sam's back ensures the safety and ease that a backpack provides. The items in it are carried so long as you keep walking regularly. Sam has an additional slot for small packages on each limb, allowing for even more delivery goodness. An imbalance on one side or another, though, provides complications. Stagger just a little on the jagged and rough environment, and the overbearing side will submit to the will of gravity, carrying you with it. With the controller's triggers, you can maintain some form of control, pulling on the straps of your pack and attempting to physically rein yourself in. This means that when horizontally maneuvering on sloped surfaces, putting the slope to one side of Sam, you will need to hold the more grounded side's trigger, attempting to ensure the weight doesn't carry you downhill. This effect takes as long as nature demands, and nature demands based on the path you chose. With a stamina gauge, you must always be vigilant. When to pull, when to release, when to physically stop, reassess, and catch your digital breath. This is assuming your hands are free, of course. If you aren't slotting a package into your Boca-style backpack, you're carrying them by hand. This equally weighs on the balance mechanics in a way you can probably predict. Big packages weigh more. That weight can balance Sam out, or it can throw him off his center of mass. With these extra appendages, you can dare to carry more, but doing so comes at a couple of unforeseen consequences. Number 1, with your hands full, you can't reach for a weapon, nor climb an item or surface. And number B, for every single second you opt to hold something in your hand, your fingers must remain on the trigger that controls said hand. While this specificity allows full body control over your animated avatar, it also leads to an inevitable fatigue. Eventually, you too may feel it. The wear and tear on your trigger fingers, the potential exhaustion that mirrors only a fragment of what your porter friend is currently suffering through. It is comparable to a horse and buggy system. It's reasonable and expected for there to be a response to an attempt at recovery, a pull on the straps, but if it's too late and the weight gets the better of you, expect to take a tumble. These tumbles are bad news. Not only does a fall mean you damage your packages, hurting your completion score at the end of every delivery, it also provides the possibility of witnessing your package go sailing off out of your reach. If your delivery requires a package for completion, recovery is vital, though sometimes Mother Nature doesn't make that recovery a simple process. Through all these means and many more, Death Stranding encourages you to slow down and take in the environment in a way that other games do not contextually ask you to consider. It is not enough to take in the crafted beauty of the mountainous landscape. You must analyze it and carefully consider your options. What path provides the least resistance? What types of risks are you willing to take? Which risks are you completely unwilling to take? Above all, how prepared are you for the upcoming hardships? Whether it is a bad hand dealt by BTs in your path, or it is nature demanding your adaptation, conquering whatever Death Stranding can throw at you is what makes it such a satisfying experience. That being said, adaptation with your human instincts and abilities is certainly one accomplishment. The other is provided by the accomplishments of the man-made structures the game provides, assuming you have the resources and foresight. In Death Stranding, overcoming the odds of the wilderness is something that can often be achieved through patience and determination. However, technological advancements are at your disposal throughout the game to help sway those odds in your favor. At first, it's an anchor and cable to hang from, giving you the ability to scale down cliff sides and then back up upon return. Then, it's a ladder, useful in both the vertical and the horizontal. As the game carries on, these additions to your arsenal begin to expand. What starts as a rudimentary rope eventually becomes an overpowered digital zip line, carrying Sam over all dangers. A postbox to store items and packages in becomes a cannon to launch those things across the map, lightening your load before entering a danger zone. Death Stranding subscribes to the power fantasy of many games before it. First, you struggle, you scratch, claw, and barely survive, only to gradually find yourself gaining more and more power, until eventually the traversal equation becomes solved. Vehicles come into play somewhat early on, providing the player with the ability to cross wide fields quickly at the cost of safety. Their major downside, though, is that the terrain of some areas can make them feel terribly inefficient. BT zones also run too much of a risk. Many times you may find yourself hopping on a bike only to begrudgingly have to abandon it, not even a portion into your journey. All problems are solved, however, as soon as you put in the work necessary to build a road. Strange, spooky, floating over all dangers. Roads are where it's at, baby. No threats, no nasty terrain shredding, no more abandoning your newly crafted bike. However, the cost and dedication it takes to build one of these roads is not easy. Some players may not encounter these structures until a return trip, but no player will ever experience them on their first traversal. The game's constant delivery loop guarantees that you must first struggle to get to a new location. Only after that point will you connect to the chiral network and suddenly have a world populated with technological options. That is, without highlighting the obvious. Let's use zip lines as an example. Zip lines are the most overpowered option in all of Death Stranding. Once set up, they have the ability to fling you from one point to another with ease, sailing over BTs, scaling mountains instantaneously, and overall becoming a one-man reliable train system that a player can customize to suit their specific paths and needs. The zip lines are the perfect example of this game's ability to present a player with tools and allow them to quote-unquote solve their own problems however they see fit. Because while the zip lines are stupidly powerful, we are neglecting to truly consider what it takes to get to that level of fluidity. A player must stomp through the environment, plan ahead with their supplies, and physically set up each zip line with their limited range of around 300 meters. In order to create a network that can play the game for you, you have to be the one to implement its foundations. This is what I meant when saying that a player will never experience these on their first journey to a new location. You must carve the path before you can cruise back down it. Let's jump back to another topic. That abandoned vehicle I mentioned earlier isn't really all that much of a problem. It's honestly kind of funny how a game like this is pretty adamant about teaching values and saying things about the world around us, but so rarely considers your abhorrent littering as one to criticize. The main reason why it's not much of an issue is because I've been omitting the most important part of this technology mechanic. Here in the world of Death Stranding, the video game, we are encouraged, though thankfully not required, to play with the online functionality turned on. Successful connection and interaction with the digital outside world gives us access to one more layer on this delicious video game dessert. For every abandoned vehicle is a potential saving grace for someone else. Every non-essential package lost to the steep slopes can be collected by a player walking down another path. A rope here helps you now. A ladder there helps someone else later. The invisible give and take system of Death Stranding displays itself through the use of the internet. I often find myself reflecting on the early ages of the internet's existence. How exciting it must have been to have so much potential suddenly within your grasp. I use the word suddenly, but that's with me ignoring the extreme load times of dial-up internet. The point is, let's reflect momentarily on the vastness of the internet. Wipe your mind clean of all that the internet has ever offered you in the way of advertising and antagonism. Focus on the sheer blank slate potential. The internet has the ability in our modern day to instantly connect you to a complete stranger all the way across the world. The two of you could have a conversation, share memories, keep each other updated on what life is like miles and miles away from your current one. News outlets could give you access to something similar. You could find yourself staying completely updated on the daily events of the entire planet. The isolation of our ancestors is completely eliminated. Their desire to alienate and misconstrue their fellow human becomes a concept laughable in the face of potential transformation transparent understanding. These individuals, who would remain strangers to us in our daily ongoings, could now be spiritually closer to us than any physical member of our neighborhood. With modern capabilities, the internet has provided us the possibility of bringing us closer together, closer than ever before conceived possible. The internet isn't just able to bring us together. Let's get big picture here. It allows us as individuals to express ourselves, to say hello world, and to be recognized, to be validated, to be accepted. The internet can open a window into our life and in return show us the world surrounding. What may feel like a niche interest isn't cause for alienation, but instead a cause for bonding. It is through the internet, after all, that I discovered most of the hobbies and activities I now captivate my life with. Without the World Wide Web, I wouldn't have found YouTube. Without YouTube, I wouldn't have watched certain channels. Without those channels, I wouldn't have even heard of Metal Gear Solid. Without that discovery, I likely would have never heard of Hideo Kojima. Without the pre-established history of myself and this creator, would I have even played Death Stranding? If one thing is certain, without the inciting incident of the internet, you would not be hearing my voice. I would be in a world completely isolated from you, never to be seen or heard by anyone not in direct proximity. Without the internet, we return to isolation. In the world of Death Stranding, as players connect more of these underground bunkers to the chiral network, the off-screen potential of technology and information expands exponentially. Characters talk about how, once connected, they are given access to data instantly. Research, family records, the fabrication of technology, you name it. The chiral network is, from what I can comprehend, this system that goes beyond the word super internet. It is a beautiful beast all of its own. On-screen, though, the player can watch as the items, packages, tools, and vehicles created and left by other players begin to pop into their reality. As you desperately scan the mountainside, realizing you did not come properly prepared, you may feel a sudden, overwhelming sense of relief. Someone has left a ladder in the most prime of positions. Someone else has left a rope, perfectly placed just after that ladder ends. On and on, you can witness as porters the world over have made an effort to assist each other in the task we all share. Throughout my journey, I would find myself able to rely on the generosity and fortuitous foresight of my fellow man. More than once, I found myself in a situation where I had to climb treacherous slopes, taking so much time out of my day to make it safely and securely, only to get to the top and turn around, planting a climbing rope at the top of a cliff. Not for me, but for the sake of anyone coming after me, ensuring they don't have to go through the agony I just experienced. As with most mechanics of Death Stranding, to describe it is one thing, to experience it is a completely different event. There may never be a way to accurately describe this sense of camaraderie formed between individuals you will never hear from, porters whose paths you will never cross. These strangers will remain strangers, but their impact on your world is so strongly felt, and in turn, so is your presence felt in theirs. This is the seizing of that internet potential, that shared burden, the shared information, the shared assistance. Together, we lift the load too overwhelming for just one lonely porter. However, that's with me willingly ignoring what the internet has become in our modern sense. This infinite potential was seized not by the optimists amongst us, but instead by those looking to use it as a source of anonymous inflictions of pain. Forum boards are filled with creeps, echo-chambering their disgusting perversions of reality. Advertisements prey upon your weaknesses, your curiosity, your human nature. Even in the world of just creative people doing creative things, human beings have taken this infinite well of entertainment and information and spat on it. No one is allowed to make things without some form of unnecessary, uninvited negativity. In the very modern times, AI has been introduced to the equation, unethically stealing from artists so that the robots may one day replace them, all in the name of profit. Even in Death Stranding, a few weeks after launch, we saw as some people began to take advantage of the system, using it to troll, endanger, and sometimes completely stop players from completing deliveries. On initial launch, there was no delete structure button. So when a player had jammed their truck in front of a door, I was completely halted from completing my delivery without several minutes of attempting to scramble and glitch my way past the obstacle. While I'm thankful that we live in a world where these problems were provided solutions, it is nonetheless important to point out that this concept of bringing people together for one global goal is an idea Kojima has attempted to inject more than once. And the reality is, there's always going to be those that stand in your way, those that should have been left behind in the era of isolation. Despite everything, maybe opposition is just part of human nature. In an interview with Hideo Kojima, Time magazine quoted him with saying, "I feel always lonely in society. There are so many people who play games feeling like that, like they don't belong in this society. They don't really feel comfortable." Time magazine went on to write, "He wants players to share that deep sense of isolation as they play Death Stranding. You're all alone playing the game," Kojima says, "and you're trying to connect this fractured society by yourself. The world is beautiful, but you're small, just a tiny speck. You feel hopeless and helpless and powerless. You feel so lonely." In the lead up to Death Stranding, it was extremely difficult to parse what exactly this game was about. This isn't just because Kojima loved being obtuse and strange prior to a game's release. It's also, in part, due to the fact that trailers would show us the cutscenes. Emotional, impactful, bizarre. Then Kojima would sit down in interviews and talk about these many themes that he was attempting to inject into the game, and the two would have like almost zero overlap. What is the game, Mr. Kojima? Kojima truly wanted to make a new genre. Death Stranding was to be the first ever Strand-type game. But what does that mean? To attempt to think about Death Stranding with the same amount of thought provided to us by the typical landscape of video games is, well, you might never find the answer of what Death Stranding is trying to be if you just sit down and play the game and never attempt to engage with it beyond that. You might never even find enjoyment in this game if you're just here to press buttons and watch Mads Mikkelsen smoke a ciggy. If you fail to attempt to meet the artist at his level and begin to view the art within the frame he is attempting to present it in, then you fail to really capture what makes Death Stranding so compelling. Death Stranding, more than anything, is a game about a man named Sam, isolated and avoided, thrust into a position where he must confront this isolation. Along the way, Sam literally and figuratively connects individuals to one another, giving them the opportunity to pop their head out of their holes and re-enter society. Some of these preppers are quick to accept the offer of connection, some are resistant. Sam doesn't need to give an impassioned speech to these people about the importance of coming together or what it means to society if efforts are shared in a world set against their existence. Sam delivers. When someone needs something, Sam delivers. When a prepper hesitates to join the United Cities of America, Sam delivers. Through action, our protagonist displays the importance of not just his services, but the potential of a connected nation of individuals, willing to put in the effort for a stranger. The parallels are obvious. Most creators draw from their life and experiences to really capture a story. Doing so adds a layer of complexity that comes with the addition of emotion. By pulling from something lived through, a creator can snatch an overlying feeling and draw from it a message they wish to deliver to their audience. In the case of Death Stranding, it's so transparently clear. After the fallout with Konami, it seemed like the industry of gaming was set to lose one of its strongest visionaries. The death of a great auteur, simply because it was the dictation of a company wishing to create profit over art. Knowing what little we knew of the situation at the time, and considering the seeming abandonment of the creator, it wouldn't be all too surprising if Kojima decided to turn his back on the world of gaming. Instead, we exist in a timeline that treats both the creator and his fans with a strong form of overwhelming kindness. Kojima, through a journey of ups and downs, could have accepted defeat and lived in a form of self-isolation. However, he found himself hoisted back to his feet by both the assistance of the many individuals he once knew, as well as the generosity of complete strangers. Do you see the vision? Hands are used in Death Stranding to an absurdly common degree. They are used in icons and symbols. When BTs move in our world, it's displayed with tar black handprints. Chiral crystals appear in the shape of outstretched hands. A new handprint appears on Sam every time he repatriates. If you submit yourself to a void out, you can easily guess what shape it's going to take. Hands are a vital role in the symbolism of this game. Just as they are important to the game's themes, hands are how we as humans interact. It is through our hands that we build. It is through our hands that we hold. It is through our hands that we reach out. Sam's aphanphasmophobia causes him to respond to touch not only in fear, but with bruises and allergic reactions. Ironic and tragic for a man to be afflicted by the handprint of the living, while also being marked by the handprints representing death. Even further ironic that this is the man that will reconnect America. Sam is not only our reluctant hero, but he will also be the one to achieve a dream thought long dead. The interconnectivity of this world. Before, after, and especially within the existence of Death Stranding, there is the constant reminder of the stick and the rope theory, a rather simple philosophical idea conceptually. Mankind's first tool was the stick, serving the purpose of keeping the bad things away, creating distance. The second tool was the rope, serving the purpose of securing that which is important to you, creating closure. Within Death Stranding, the message stands out. The first Strand-type game, Strand as in rope. Death Stranding is not typical to your average action game. As stated before, it many times struggles to appeal to the common individual. Within the landscape of video games, it can be difficult to find popular, high-budget experiences that aren't rife with the concept of guns, shooting, stabbing, and an entertaining amount of violence. That's not to say these things aren't present in this game, they just take a back seat to the slow and methodical. Action games provide this rush and thrill that many of us seek. High reward, low risk. In a game like Call of Duty, you are mentally encouraged and programmed to shoot at anything that shoots at you. Online, you find yourself pointing your barrel at an enemy controlled by someone in the same position as you. On both ends, a human gripping their controller with the intention of victory and progress through simulated virtual violence. For as long as video games have been a popular extension of entertainment, we have been increasing the violent tendencies. To say that we, as a gaming culture, are oversaturated and numb to this concept wouldn't be a new observation. Death Stranding stands in curious opposition to these shoot-bang gun fiestas in a couple of key ways. Firstly, there's the addition of non-lethal weaponry, bola guns, smoke distractions, and a cord for close-quarters combat or stealth takedowns. Each of these serve as a safe and reasonable non-lethal alternative in the world of Death Stranding, especially appreciated when the opposition isn't necessarily keen on killing you. Mules have no interest in murder, only mugging. They want your packages. If they manage to wear you down with their stun spears, you'll pass out, then wake up, dragged away from their base and missing any deliveries you were carrying. BTs, similarly, aren't known for straight up killing or consuming Sam, more so interested in dragging him away to face the larger BT bosses. However, what about the enemies that do want you dead? Homo demon terrorists have very little regard for life or safety. Equipped with real bullets, they almost dare you to fight back on their terms. If you so choose, you absolutely can. After a certain point in the game, guns can be switched between blood bullets used to eliminate BTs and actual bullets lethal to people. In a game like Metal Gear Solid, the choice between lethal and non-lethal takedowns are more so a matter of self-imposed difficulty. Non-lethal activities are mostly for those willing to add a challenge to their playthrough. Usually, this path of pacifism takes more time, runs a wider risk of failure, and can severely limit a player in terms of options and weaponry. On the flip side though, if you kill an enemy, they're gone. No more patrolling, no more threat, no chance for a buddy to wake them up. Killing is easy. For that reason, even if a player is of moral fibers willing to see these digital soldiers as people, they may still submit to the route of lethality. Death Stranding, by its very nature, discourages you from this potential murder fest because while it does provide you with the means, it's the consequences that must be considered. The very opening of the game showed us exactly how high priority it is that we not allow a beached thing to reconnect with the corpse. And S-ranking our mother's corpse into the furnace was our tutorial to show just how hard you would have to work if you don't want a void out to trigger. In other words, every body you drop is just one more body you must carry, presenting us with this enemy putting the gun in our hand, but applying so much pressure to the action of pulling the trigger caused myself and many others to never once fire a bullet at the terrorists. The game will eventually begin to open up, like its Metal Gear predecessors, allowing us the option of non-lethal combat. Rubber bullets firing the same as regular bullets, divorced of all consequence. The conquering you feel over nature can equally begin to apply to these human threats. Without the worries of murder, you may eventually return to dish out some Porter justice, incapacitating entire camps and leaving them to soundly snooze, assuming, of course, you don't smack into an unconscious opponent with a vehicle, flattening their skull. Spoilers, I tried to do this while recording footage, and it doesn't kill them. I was actually kind of disappointed. I thought it'd be really funny if you could just accidentally kill a dude. It can begin to be worrisome though. The game gives you access to an arsenal of weaponry and then tells you not to use them. In another game, this thought obstacle is usually applied to the lethal route. 1,000 ways to murder the enemy have to be locked behind a mental cage as you seek to carry out a non-lethal quest. Death Stranding keeps the sentiment but turns it on its head. Non-lethal capabilities have a far wider reach in terms of weaponry, making it feel a lot more accessible and fair. Yet still, wouldn't it just be so much easier if the enemy never got back up? To do a non-lethal path in another game requires much more effort. In this game, being a murderous monster is what takes up more of your time and patience. Despite the Death Stranding making killing inadvisable, don't throw the bullets out just yet. The guns aren't completely useless. During moments of rather unexpected inclusion, Sam will find himself transported onto a battlefield. Scripted sequences of satisfying set pieces, yet all the same, immersive displays of the game's strongest elements of design. The battlefields are each dressed like infamous real-world war-torn front lines, possessing a heavily evocative sense of destruction and brutality. In these moments, Sam is thrust into the chaos without warning, elevating the confusion for himself and the player, in turn elevating the sense of fear and dread of those battlefields. Gunfire whizzes past your head, mortars explode concerningly close, tanks roll by, shaking the ground around them. The ghostly apparitions of soldiers pass through you, ducking into cover, unaware of your presence. The sound design, an element of extreme quality throughout this entire game, somehow manages to shine even brighter here. These battlefields are created by the collective trauma of fallen soldiers, beaches forming their own nightmarish heaven outside of their regular beach. The warriors on this field do not respond to Sam's presence. All but one. Cliff Unger, played by Mads Mikkelsen, lies in wait. As Sam enters his proximity, his head snaps into action. The most fearsome warrior on the battlefield has some sort of personal mission to achieve, and it's directly related to us. It'd be understandable if a player was taken aback by Unger's appearance in this place. Up until this point, Cliff has been appearing before us through the visions caused by plugging into BB. As you gain more insight into this other life, you can watch as Cliff goes from being a loving father with ambitions for his test tube baby to a man filled with dread and anguish over the entire situation, crying at the bedside of his comatose wife. Those visions remain within the mental link between Sam and BB, experienced in between rests and plot points. There lies the memory of a man. Here, on the battlefield, lingers Unger's restless soul. Man of the front line, separated from his beloved BB, Cliff senses the duo's presence on his beach. The moment he gets a whiff of them, he deploys puppeted dead soldiers to his will, sending them to track down the living and put several bullets in them. Here, the guns laying around in readily available positions but varying quantities show their most useful side. Grabbing everything you can, you struggle against the undead soldiers, attempting to take Unger out before he can corner you. Seeing as they're already dead and on the beach, nothing is off the table. In these sections, you can take advantage of the game's rather shocking amount of combat-related depth. Prior to the firing range added in the director's cut, this might have been the only time you would have felt challenged by the game's gunplay. Enemies will track you down by sound and last known position. With the battlefields providing an abundant amount of cover in tight corners, you could potentially use this to your advantage, allowing you the opportunity of distractions and stealth takedowns, giving you the ability to fight back even when resources are scarce. Yet, they likely won't ever hit that point. On a battlefield loaded with discarded weaponry, it can potentially be difficult to not be absolutely loaded up on fresh guns, in which case, there's very little threat. Death Stranding, even here in its greatest showcase for combat encounters, as far as the base game is concerned, still doesn't manage to impress me all too much. While these encounters do an amazing job at setting the mood and stirring up some adrenaline, the threat feels mostly minimal. At no point did I ever find myself properly challenged or struggling in any capacity. Off script. That's not quite true. While recording, I was playing the game on a hard mode for pretty much the entire of the run. Scratch that, I might have been playing on very hard now that I think about it. Regardless, I had to switch it back down to something a lot easier because the last Cliff Unger fight was constantly kicking my butt cheeks, dude. I played that part so many times and it felt like there was just something I wasn't getting, like as a player for a while. And then it was just like, no, every approach I ever took, I got lit up immediately. And like, I even sat there and thought about it for a while. I was like, did I ever struggle this hard the first time I played this game? No, I didn't. I don't know what I was doing wrong. I don't know what I did differently, but I just couldn't get past that section. I even looked it up. I was like, am I alone? Did other people feel this? And other people did feel it, but then everyone else in the comments or the replies said to that person, nah, you're crazy. It's not that hard. It's pretty easy. And that just made me like, okay, all right, I'm just stupid, I guess. And then I saw someone in the replies be like, just turn it down. Just turn the difficulty down during those fights. It's not worth it. And I kind of sat there and I thought about it for a second. I said, yeah, it's not worth it. I'm just trying to get footage, man. Who cares what difficulty I'm playing on? So then I turned it back down. So anyways, back to the actual script. The only time I truly felt the injection of interest are the moments where I hid from Cliff, slowly sneaking up closer and closer to him, narrowly avoiding his soldier's gaze as he cries out for his lost baby. The situation felt tense. The battle felt like a constant back and forth, but I'll admit it, that's because I made it that way. Like I said before about other games, sometimes the path of play is chosen by a player simply because they wish to challenge themselves. And while I think Death Stranding should be commended for being capable of giving that kind of freedom to a player, allowing them to tackle a plethora of problems with a multitude of solutions, that doesn't really change the fact that the game felt underbaked enough that I wanted something more on my very first playthrough. When playing through the game a second time, nearly every single part of combat fell apart in ways I really couldn't have initially predicted. Once you stop giving Death Stranding the cautious respect it seems to evoke, you realize that threats can be taken out in a rather disrespectfully aggressive manner. I'm sure some will applaud this. They may even say that it continues to support the idea this game allows self-expression through gameplay. Going in loud and hard is just as viable a way as taking things slow and deliberate. But if you get your hands on this game, crank the difficulty as high as you can and go absolutely sicko mode on every enemy you encounter, both here on the battlefield as well as out in the BT zones, you will rarely find the challenge too steep. Perhaps the reality is that this game was just simply not balanced to account for the more fearless of players, or maybe the enemies are outmatched by the game's wealth of capable mechanics. Ironic and big talk from a guy who had to turn down the difficulty while recording gameplay, but I digress. Regardless of the cause, the effect remains the same. Death Stranding is a game about connecting, holding hands, learning to live peacefully alongside others. Yet, it is also a game containing a competent system for combat. The fights here in the nightmare Outer Heavens unfortunately serve to make the original message a little too muddy for it to land. This nearly convinced me to leave the battlefields out of the discussion, as they don't help reinforce what I think Death Stranding is trying to say. I'm truly unsure if I should mark this as a knock against the game though. In a way, it can seem contradictory. It can seem hypocritical. Sometimes it is. Yet also, by putting the gun in our hand but stacking the odds against our murderous intent, it wants us to accept that violence isn't the best solution. By the end of this battlefield storyline, Unger himself will find that he is unable to achieve his goals through violence. His spirit can only rest once he drops the gun and reconnects. The best solution for the average threat in Death Stranding is to build a road or zipline over them, completely eliminating any consequence they possess. Whether it's just you painstakingly working towards this construction around a problem, or the joint effort of players around the globe, the game does still manage to squeak out the message of connection. Through the rope, we find ourselves stronger together than we could ever have being apart. Connecting, in terms of the narrative, is and has always been the point. Kojima wishes to express to the player the importance of working together. In the story, Sam begins to connect to people that put their faith in him and his abilities, sharing their knowledge and expertise where possible. Through this, Sam is softened. His heart grows and his affections begin to show. He takes interest in the well-being of other characters. He talks more and more as the game progresses, and most importantly, you can witness his slowly developing relationship with BB. When BB is happy, Sam is happy. In gameplay, you operate with your fellow porters to create networks of solutions that eliminate the shared problem. Additionally, should you lose a package or item, a player can return it to your world or even complete the order for you. It becomes very clear not long into the game that all of these systems are very much built around the message of the rope. The rope being the human technological evolution that allowed us to bind, secure, and keep things close. What I want to lean into though is just how brave I think this concept is as as a basis for a video game. According to Kojima, when he first presented his idea to his own development team, there was a pushback. The vast majority said that it was an idea for a game that could never work, that the very premise of this game is not the reason people play video games. To that thought, I starkly disagree. We, as in players, as in all players as a collective, do not play games for the same reasons. There is a reason why house washing simulators are a popular genre, yet I am unable to comprehend the appeal. There is a reason games with disturbing art styles always attract attention despite being repulsive to a large majority. There is a reason why money-grubbing sports games still manage to sell so highly despite receiving a barrage of constant criticism. The reason is that we are not playing video games for the same purpose as the next person. So, on the one hand, they're right. Playing games to become chummy with strangers online isn't necessarily why people play games, but that doesn't mean it couldn't be. A game where you only help others rather than compete with and bring harm to them is definitely not common in gaming. Even so, maybe it should be. I think one of the main reasons why I wish to champion this game is because it is a high-budget opposition to the world surrounding it. Another reason is certainly because of how it is art more than it is video game. Despite that, just look at it. Look at how much depth I have managed to pull out of discussing its systems. Witness how much video game there is. Observe how much more this video has left to go through. Even with such elaboration, I assure you, no words can ever properly convey its complexities. So what I'm saying is this: maybe we need this game more than some are willing to admit. Perhaps Death Stranding is a step closer to the world that many have been talking about longing for. When my mother would ask, "Is there a game where you don't shoot people?" I felt embarrassed, knowing that I could explain that yes, there are, yet I'd also have to explain that they too contain some level of violence. As time has gone on, I have wondered if there is a story capable of telling a compelling narrative without using the crutch of simulated conflict. For the record, of course it's possible, yet you will usually only find those games on the independent scene or wrapped up in a low-budget project. How rare it is that a game dares to break from the norm and risk a lot of money doing so. I think that Kojima's original idea likely contained zero weapons. This is just me theorizing here. Something closer to a violent, absent hiking adventure. And honestly, I would have loved to see that, but I'd argue that what we got is still kinda perfect. It's a marriage of the two concepts. Violence exists and is sometimes something you must take use of, but isn't a problem solver. By having guns and using them to send a direct message of pacifism, I think Death Stranding managed to inch closer to the message it originally sought. Sure, maybe that's not a message for everyone. Maybe that doesn't result in a game for everyone. However, I'd argue in favor of a piece of art that has something to say and uses its mechanics to say that, rather than a bloopy flashing light simulator that refuses to say anything at all. Despite all of my praise, I do stop to criticize this submission to normalcy. I think Death Stranding didn't go far enough with that pacifism. Harming a fellow human being is nearly off limits, but only nearly. I imagine that killing and then handling a corpse is so unnecessarily obtuse that a player willing to break the established role and attempt to commit murder is also likely to be the kind of person frustrated by its consequences. Yet this same level of care isn't applied in the direction of BTs. Shooting, eliminating, and urinating on BTs is treated as a good thing, a net positive. You are removing them from your map, which removes the threat they pose to you. Plus, you are liberating them of their purgatorial existence. You are moving them on to the other side. With both of these reasons combined, even the most loving and patient player is primed to perpetuate violence on our paranormal pals. There is no consequence, assuming you don't get rushed by alerted BTs. There is only benefit. The average enjoyer of video games would likely find this as a positive and engaging part of an otherwise slumbering game. So then why, oh why, do I dare harbor criticism for this activity? Well, because on my first playthrough, I never fired a bullet outside of a boss fight. I never chucked a grenade into a BT horde. I never became aware of those weapons' sheer overpowered capabilities. The game kept giving me gun after grenade, and I just stuck to the old patient plonking around, sneaking and avoiding. On playthrough number 2, when I realized just how nonsensically unstoppable the weapons were, the entire game changed. Like, I mean it. It felt like a different game, and not one I loved. The challenge evaporated, the tension was lifted, my focus and patience became purposeless. Every problem could be solved with a gun. That's my criticism. Why did Death Stranding steer away from violence if it was just going to submit to it regardless? Shooting BTs feels like a sort of cop-out. It's easy. Sometimes it takes patience and proper planning, but for the most part, it's right back to where video games have been for the longest time. Mindless shoot-bangs. To me, the weapons scream cowardice. The message seemed so clear, and now it's muddied. The gameplay seemed stacked against you with purpose. Now, I'm the one with the power. It could be easily argued that yes, that's the point. The feeling of humans taking their power back. Understanding and overcoming the disaster slowly but surely, yet personally, I like this game less after equipping a gun. I like it more when I'm forced to use the rope. Games like Death Stranding are why I find myself hesitant to listen to my fellow gamer. Player opinions and their reviews are important. The reception of a game has the potential to dictate the trajectory of the future of video games. So pointing out the bad and praising the good is an important part of the process. Yet, for any number of reasons, a reviewer may not be a very valid critic for the specific game they're experiencing. I know, at its face, that sounds like a harsh comment, but let me elaborate. Allow me to cook. If Call of Duty shooter lover were to play Animal Crossing, he may find out he loves it, but let's say he didn't. Would his 1 out of 10 be of any value to listen to? If someone who exclusively enjoys point-and-click adventure games gave Doom Eternal a shot, should we take their inexperienced outlook into consideration? How would you know that a reviewer has or doesn't have that kind of experience? If someone doesn't disclose that information, you probably can't know. Therefore, what merit does their criticism hold? What I'm saying is this: not every game is made for every person. And with games as critically ill-received and player misunderstood as Death Stranding, you can begin to understand my hesitancy. Perhaps this is my most controversial take ever recorded on the channel, but you're this far into the video, I'm sure you'll either agree with me or at least let me cook long enough to see where I'm coming from. So, here it is. I don't think games need to be fun. There's this weird stigma around video games that has existed for a very long time, that they are honor-bound to their medium. Pac-Man was made to be a silly, fun game to pass time. Therefore, so should every game. Every bleep-bloop light show we pop into our console should elicit this same type of joy. With us deep into the video, I think you don't need me to hold your hand on how potentially insane and certainly reductive this idea is. We both know the truth. Fun is subjective. What is fun to you and fun to me are likely not the same thing. Like this. Look at this stuff. To me, I see it every day and wonder how anyone can find this entertaining. It escapes me how someone can sink so many hours of their life into something that plays like this. Not me. This is not bait for me, I'll tell you that much. You won't see me getting excited for a Call of Duty. You won't hear me jazzed for another racing game. I wouldn't even flinch at a sports game announcement. And even if you do enjoy one or all of these, you should understand that that doesn't define you. Just because you like something and I don't, doesn't make one of us less human. However, it's not even the subjectivity of fun that makes me so confident in my statement that games don't need to be fun. Like I said, you know that. The reason why I'm making this claim is because trying to say the opposite is an attempt to limit video games as an art form. To say that they must be this one thing and try no further. Imagine doing that with any other form of entertainment. To say that books must provide A or B, that a movie can only be one type of movie. To claim that nothing is allowed to experiment, to show ambition, to stand out. When I say there are times where I truly can't trust my fellow gamer, this is what I mean. These little moments where review upon review says, it's not for everyone, it's not for everyone, it's not for everyone. Okay, good. It shouldn't be. Isn't it kind of lame that we live in a world where every game attempts to appeal to as wide a variety as possible? I know it's for profits, but again, it's so limiting to true potential. I don't want you to make a game that appeals to me specifically. Attempting to do so wouldn't just lose the attention of others, it wouldn't be true to the game's creators. I don't want you to make a game for me. I want you to make a game for you. Bring something new to the table. Make me try, make me think, make me dream. If we made wanted gray video games that appealed to everyone. We wouldn't get those treasures that move us. Ideas carefully formatted into gameplay that challenge you and your mind. And that's the real aggression in my take here. If that's not you, if you don't want to be mentally challenged and stimulated, then buddy, you're in the wrong place. Death Stranding, unsurprisingly, was hit with polarizing opinions in the landscape of video game reviews. Critics gave it immense praise. Those of us with proper expectations went in and got exactly what we wanted. So naturally, when Average Joe went in for his dip of curiosity, it didn't go very well. The pacing of this game is one that intentionally wants to slowly ease you into its systems, hook you in with its narrative, and leave you curious to find answers. So naturally, some players approached this game with a bit of haste, and it didn't pay off for them. The slog of the opening, as it purposefully isolates the player and makes them feel at a disadvantage in comparison to the overwhelming power of nature, is something you either play along with or you wrestle against. The narrative being one that pops into an ongoing world with characters already aware of the harsh reality they live in is a game of keep up. If that's a mental sprint you didn't sign up for, it will come across as frustrating and a seeming mess. Should you be an individual lacking in the curiosity required to delve into the deep levels of world building this game is going to eventually toss at you piece by piece, then you are never going to vibe with the pace at which this game unveils its answers. In a very, very simple sense, this is one of those games that I need to impress upon you. If those opening hours do not entice an individual, if a player doesn't have the patience or time to take this game at its set pace, if they are tripping and falling constantly after the first couple of orders because they're trying to rush through it, I don't think there is anything this game is going to do going forward that is suddenly going to swing them to its side. And I think that's what some missed. This is not a game that induces adrenaline. This isn't a horror game. This isn't even a simple walking simulator. It's all of those things and so much more. The issue is that some players attempted to approach this game like it was Metal Gear. Some tried to play it like it was a game they've played before. But you can't do that if you want to maximize the gains this experience can provide. You have to play this game like it's the world's first Strand-type game, Death Stranding. Personally, I attempt to play every game with this approach, letting the game inform me how it wants to be played. If you're some sort of self-respecting video game reviewer, I feel like you should likely have that same mentality. Yet, that's not the world we live in. Some people want it fast. Some people want instant rewards. Some people want to watch that number go up. Those people, one way or another, are the reason Kojima doesn't work at Konami anymore. These folks are not the target audience. I put this section in here in order to explain why so many people would have hit this game and bounced off, while so many others have painstakingly attempted to express their admiration for it. And while I don't think this game does everything perfectly, I do think that the most popular criticisms I've seen are of bad faith, or at least coming from a place that attempts to say that the deliberate choices made in the development of this game are somehow overlooked faults. I've read several reviews from the time of release. The majority of them are split in a few ways. Positive ones seem to usually be writers attempting to wrap their mind around the sensory overload of the experience, likely coming down from its emotionally satisfying ending and getting their review submitted before the deadline. They occasionally fail to unpack everything involved and are much quicker to praise the game's quirks and oddities. The much wider majority of reviews are like what we're doing here, attempting to find a middle ground, somewhere between praise and criticism, still landing somewhere with pleasure due to that undeniable Kojima charm. The negative reviews, on the other hand, almost always inevitably hit a point where I feel like I'm watching someone with a good point fail to put it into words, inevitably shooting themselves in the foot. By that, I mean the negative reviews typically contain a smoking gun that causes me to discredit it. The most common being a fundamental example of either misinterpreting the faults of their own or purposefully conveying it with hostility. For example, one critical review I was reading made me completely halt and toss out all information gathered from it via one provided GIF/GIF. In it, the player is stumbling, Sam leaning forward in a manner I have never personally experienced before. The package is stacked so absurdly high. In the section where I had outlined how orders worked, I specifically highlighted the fact that what and how many orders is a player option. Do you want to challenge yourself in exchange for maximum rewards? How often are you willing to jeopardize comfort and safety for the sake of an order's completion? Fundamentally, were you to seek only reaching this game's conclusion, you wouldn't need to take on all that much stress. Yet, the caption underneath the aforementioned GIF expresses that this is what the first several hours of Death Stranding is going to be like. Firstly, no, that's just not true. That's what they looked like for you, know? Because you made it that way. You stacked the orders high. You didn't rest when you had the opportunity. And just based on this one GIF, I'm guessing you metaphorically slammed your head into every metaphorical object and then asked why you now have metaphorical brain damage. Secondly, if that was the opening hours of Death Stranding, if that's what you gathered from this game's tutorials, why wouldn't you stop and reassess something? How did it never occur to you to stop bullheading through every problem and maybe just take on less orders, walk slower, or just try to wrap your mind around the game's mechanics? And this is the problem with a lot of criticism thrown at this game. This one example is indicative of an issue that comes up somewhat often. The player here either didn't understand that the game's rough pushback was a direct consequence of their own actions, not by some fault of the game, but instead because of its purposeful mechanics being abused, or they purposefully misconstrued that fact in an attempt to justify their reasoning to dislike this game. In no way am I saying this is applicable to all criticisms of this game, not at all. What I'm saying is that these types of reviews really got in the way of genuine criticisms that the game should have received. This bizarre outcry of people attempting to play a game about delivering packages like it's Sonic the Hedgehog and then getting upset that the game told them, "Sir, it's not that kind of party." The reputation the game received as a polarizing experience that quote-unquote isn't for everyone hurt Death Stranding's exposure in a way that I find unfair and, more effectively, disappointing. Not because this game deserved better, but because it made talking about it very difficult at the time. It was the type of thing where I'd say Death Stranding and noses would scrunch up in nervous disgust. People who had never even given the game a chance had just based so much of their opinions on that of someone who, pardon my phrasing, played the game wrong. It made me realize how much growth the industry has yet to achieve, and further led to my own personal growth, realizing how little I can trust the average review of a game. No, this game does have issues, loads of them, but I don't think the criticism for Death Stranding lies inside the pacing, the strange dialogue, the exposition dumps, the world building. The game plays exactly the way I think it wants to. The problem comes up in the smaller aspects where I think it fails to reach the heights of its lofty ambitions. Those moments where you can tell it's going somewhere, but didn't quite make it there. The atmosphere of Death Stranding is one of a lifeless world. While you can witness nature reclaiming the land and catch a glimpse of fish aimlessly meandering through streams, humans are so few and far between. Occasionally, you may bump shoulders with random porters. A couple of missions involve you transporting a living being. Outside of this, Death Stranding is a purposefully empty game. This feeling of isolation is a key element to both the message and general vibes of the game overall, and I think Kojima Pro did an impeccable job with capturing it. On the night of release, I remember having a moment where the rolling of thunder in the game was so accurate that I took my headphones off to listen for an incoming storm, only to realize my mistake, put them back on, and just soak in how incredible this ambient sound design is. Death Stranding, in the larger world of video game creation, is a key example of the importance of sound design. Weather sounds overall have this familiar feeling to them, where sometimes in a game it can feel transparently like a simulation of rain. Death Stranding makes me believe in the weather and its effects due to sheer ear-tickling satisfaction. Which is good, considering we are talking about a world threatened by the effects of weather. If it wasn't believable, the floor of Timefall's concept may fall through and lose a player's interest early on in a game packed with countless raindrops. Top to bottom, Death Stranding cannot be criticized for the sheer atmosphere its soundscape provides. All of it not only well implemented, but also so widely taken advantage of. Sometimes you could truly just close your eyes and still be able to fully comprehend the story being told to you in a given moment of gameplay. But it's not just the ambience and atmosphere of sound that Death Stranding nails. All of the tiny bleep bloops and readout sounds on the side of the screen hit with a sweet satisfaction. The Odradek's clicks and clacks, as well as its whooshing sounds as it scans the environment, provide instant feedback. When the mules detect you, they let out this disgusting noise that sounds like a robotic animal, with different versions for variety as well as different levels of intensity. It heightens the hairs on your neck, makes you frantically flick the screen around to spot who's spotting you. But by being consistent and clear, the sounds parlay information to you quicker and clearer than a visual could. In the rain, BTs hiss and growl, making them detectable even if your eyes aren't trained on them. with spatial audio being implemented expertly. Death Stranding keeps you aware of the game in all of its infinite eccentricities, which there are a lot of. There's always a wealth of information to take in, but the hard work of Koji Pro makes it a little easier on the player to keep track of it all. While traversing, Sam occasionally mutters to himself, breaking through the void. In a world without people, he is free to speak openly. The man could have entire monologues, personal asides, but he doesn't. Sam is quiet, typically only speaking when frustrated. Sometimes he growls at a BT. A lot of times, he complains at you, the player. Sloppy work annoys him. It's just you and Sam in this lifeless world, but in your journey, you may not actually feel the sheer overwhelming loneliness the game's atmosphere imposes. Because despite all that the game provides in environment, sound, and even story, it also provides us with companions of an unexpected variety. The Odra Deck is a handy device attached to Sam's left shoulder. When activated by plugging into BB, it can detect and locate BTs. Mechanically, it makes stealth functional. The Odra Deck possesses multiple statuses and shapes, keeping you up to date on a given situation with just a glance. When getting too close to a BT, alerting them to your presence, the Odra Deck glows orange and begins spinning. Just before the rotation, however, it gives out a little squeak. Just the same, when switching from target to target, the device lets out a slight whir. These small noises, paired with the icons and movements, tells the player all they need to know without ever taking their eyes away from Sam's body. Yet, I think the Odra Deck is often overlooked. Averagely, it's viewed as a simple stealth-enhancing device, but truthfully, it's more than that. BB stands for Bridge Baby. Born of a still mother, still connected via chiral technology, the baby acts as a bridge between the living and the dead. Thus, when taken out into the field, a Bridge Baby can see the horrors we cannot. What BB provides to this narrative, however, is beyond that of a service or a device. As the game goes on, BB begins to show more and more of a personality. BB lets out small chirps and bubbling laughter when Sam performs something cool or successful. BB floats around in hot springs, occasionally kicking as if to swim. At any given point in the game, you have the ability to look in first person. By pressing another button, you can look down to check on BB. In turn, BB looks up at you, sometimes showing you a little affection. As the game progresses, the connection between Sam and BB as characters grows. As the two get more comfortable, their personalities start to shine more. Sam starts talking to BB somewhat regularly. BB sometimes makes a sound or two, prompting Sam to respond. I'd be lying if I said I was excited by the idea of having a weird little baby attached to my gut for the entirety of this game, but I'd also be lying if I said that I didn't eventually warm up to it. I have a slight discomfort around babies. The smaller they are, the more uncomfortable I'm made. When I got my own baby in a jar with the collector's edition, there was a part of me that looked at the baby and felt worried that this game's companion character was going to negatively impact my perception of my experience. And that's with me managing to ignore the already bizarre nature of a baby in a belly bottle. Despite concerns, I started to genuinely grow a fondness for BB through Sam's fondness. As he softened up, I softened up. I, just like Sam, have a fear of intimacy, as well as a pretty strong phobia of babies. And while this game didn't magically cure me of either, it did help me in thinking that maybe all I needed to get over these issues was a little bit of effort and exposure, just like Sam. Without BB and the Odra Deck, you would have a very rough time maneuvering through this world. Death Stranding even gives you a few deliveries without BB's assistance, just to prove that point and make you appreciate the little jarhead some more. Without BB, the stealthy options through a BT zone become incredibly difficult, nearing levels of impossible. While I did nail it on my initial playthrough, and while recording, it was through extreme careful caution that took up a lot of unnecessary time. In these few deliveries though, you realize something else. Not only is the game functionally harder without your companion and little robot arm, but it's also so much more empty. The voidless world seems even more like a gaping hole, because during these missions, you are finally, well and truly, alone. Further accentuated by Sam's occasional moments of speaking aloud, only to remember that BB isn't there to hear him. More than serving their function, the Odra Deck and BB are so vital to the personality of this game. BB's coos and the Odra Deck's thumbs up after exiting a danger zone truly define part of the connected experience. No matter where you are in the world of Death Stranding, you're not truly alone. And while it's minor, maybe even missable, their absence would cause the game to have a very different feel overall. That being said, even if they were absent, you still may not always feel the loneliness. In the initial moments of the game, the world is unquestionably empty and hopeless. As Sam hooks more and more locations up with the chiral network, the more you will see players' structures begin to populate the world. Calling out to them at the touch of a button causes them to respond. Yet it's just their presence alone that informs you of an ongoing story, the tale of others struggling alongside you, simultaneously trekking through the unknown and finding a way to make it together. You're not alone. You're never alone. Even at its most empty, this world is full of life and the little reminders of this truth. Have you ever watched a film and just really bought into the acting? Like the performance is just nailing it so hard that you have completely forgotten that what you're watching is fictional. The actor is making such magic with their skills, and you don't even stop to remember that that isn't actually what they're like in real life. Performances enhance any piece of entertainment that require acting. The more we can buy into it, the easier it is for us to take it seriously, to ignore the jarring break in reality that exists between us and the characters on screen. I explain all of this because, well, you ever played a video game where the voice acting is just not doing that at all?
Oh, Jill, this house is dangerous. There are terrible demons. Ouch!
Death Stranding at no point ever hits those levels of absurdity. However, it certainly isn't immune to the comparisons. Most any on-screen character that appears and delivers a breathy discussion on how tired they are, or that they don't really want to help you in the reconstruction of America, comes off with instant believability. Is this because it's easy to just be tired in the voice recording booth? Or is it that being exhausted just comes across as a natural and relatable performance to the human mind? Either way, you won't really hear me complain about any of the sideshows. The people you meet across this broken land are named after their locations, their jobs, or perhaps something that defines them. This extends from those accepting your deliveries to the key players that we will be in constant contact with throughout the entire game. The more simple and mundane folks are all named relatively normally. Take our main man, Sam, for instance. Sam Porter Bridges. It's his name, his job, and those who own him. The names take a left turn from being mundane to being downright superhero levels of on the nose when we direct our attention to the big named actors. Fragile, Mama, Higgs, Dead Man, Die Hard Man, Heart Man. Each of these are so incredibly interesting in so many ways. Their names come from that of their origins, their trauma, their purpose. When I first saw their names in a trailer, I guffawed. I shook my head in disbelief that there are so many here with such similar names and themes. Honestly, I'd say it never necessarily becomes warranted, but once you let the absurdity settle, you can find a lot of depth in these characters. Depth that is somewhat shocking considering just how wooden the majority of the performances come across in English. Characters like Dead Man may share the likeness of Guillermo del Toro, but his voice is provided by Jesse Cordy, an experienced voice actor. You can tell.
Sam, if one of those things eats you, it'll trigger a void out. You'll come back, sure, but the surrounding area will still be a crater.
Dead Man remains convincing, fitting, and always delivers lines with a natural believability that I can buy into, which is good considering just how much screen time he possesses. Meanwhile, Heartman is modeled after director Nicholas Winding Refn, his voice similarly provided by the continuously uncredited voice actor Darren Jacobs. Jacobs brings this accurate portrayal to the character, data-driven and passionate in his research, but occasionally showing a strong flair of humanity within. While it makes sense for Hartman as a character to come across as, let's say, somewhat artificial, the same can't be said for a couple of key players. Fragile is one of our most important grounding forces in the game. She is there at the very opening scene and will be around in and out until the final moments. Getting her right would be vital to this game's endeavors. French actress Léa Seydoux lends both her physical and vocal appearance to the character. In many ways, she nails the soft charm Fragile needed. She is that stranger we just seem to keep bumping into. An air of mystery hangs over her, yet there's something that makes me want to put my trust in her. I find her captivating. Yet all the same, I do occasionally find myself tuned out to what she's saying. When she delivers some exposition, it's not what she says, but how she says it that can convince me that even she isn't sure what she's reading. The same goes for Mama, played by famous American Margaret Qualley in both voice and model. Mama, maybe more than any other actor, seems the most disconnected and foreign, which is not great great because she has given a lot of jargon to say that makes perfect sense to someone as Kojima-pilled as me, but boy, does it have to be just nonsense to the common ear. That's not an attempt to undermine her though. I'm saying I don't envy her position. Despite the jargon, despite the disconnect, despite the fact that I'm so positive that some of these famous actors haven't looked twice at video games as a serious form of storytelling, there's something there. Something shines through. The main characters of Death Stranding are written to have their burdens, their traumas, their motivations. When it's time to expose those to Sam and the player, sometimes they can come across as forced in terms of timing. Like, he's just the Amazon delivery guy, please stop trauma dumping on him. Yet, even when the knowledge that what you're hearing is perhaps ill-timed, their brilliance can't be overshadowed. The characters within our cast shines brightly. Their camaraderie and faith in Sam can melt a frozen heart. The music paired with their deep confessions can move a stone-cold soul. Even at their most cardboard of deliveries, I can't help but tear up at the more dramatic retellings. It leaves me with this confusing position. I shrug at the circumstances because on one hand, I really do think that if you showed a clip of this game in isolation to someone, they truly would think it's the most robotic and stiff performances ever. However, once you've spent hours and hours with these people, they feel a little more natural. In addition, when all of these people you bump into in this world act this way, you just kind of start thinking that maybe you're the weird one. Maybe Sam is weird for being so natural in a world that otherwise should have shaped into something resembling less of humanity. Allow me for a moment to indulge myself, because I so often like to think in these ways when I ask, what does this look like from the outside? It's a question that I find fun, funny, but most importantly, informative. However, let's put that to the side. Let's focus on what it's like for me, someone with over 200 hours split across 4 different versions of this game, because it really does look different here on the inside. There may be 100 ways to put it, but even when witnessing these cutscenes for the 4th or 5th time, the performances still move me. Through all that I could possibly criticize, I do find that these characters are going to stick with me for much longer than I had originally thought they would. Does that speak more to the level of writing, acting, voice acting, or overall charm that we're dealing with? Maybe we should just really give all credit to the music department. Perhaps it's the animation team, the directing, the final sheen of polish that ties everything together. Or maybe it's just all of it together. Regardless, the ability to take this otherwise bizarre collection of individuals and make them feel real and memorable by the end is the lasting impact Death Stranding's cast leaves on me. Yes, they're weird. Sometimes they ham it up. Other times they play their role with an odd understatement. Yet, I love them all the same. Higgs chews the scenery. Fragile makes me feel comforted. Amelie smoothly coerces me. Heartman makes me feel sorrow. Deadman makes me feel less alone. Mads Mikkelsen speaks to his jar in a way so damn believable. Norman Reedus grunts and groans in ways that make me grunt and groan in agreement. Above all of them, Tommy Earl Jenkins closes our story by absolutely acting his socks off in the closing hours. In the end, I cried. I always cry. You're crying over Death Stranding? This crazy cast of misfits. They got to me. And on that same note, sometimes when you get into the rhythm of a game, you can just sort of begin to meet it at eye level. Nothing it does can really throw you off. You're immersed. But every now and then, there are those little hints of Kojima-style strangeisms that make me do a lightly befuddled raspberry, a slight or a small chuckle.
Careful. The contents are fragile. It's okay.
Followed by a okay. Even when I become fully familiar with the tendency of these tactics, there's always part of me that is willing to zoom out a little and examine the scene from a distance. Like, it's silly and strange, but sometimes it's strange in a very specific way. Sometimes it's awkward with a capital A, performed in ways that feel directly intentional. But also, when compared to the rest of the game, you can't help but feel like you're the only one who finds it weird. In simpler words, I mean it like this. When you arrive for the first time at the junk dealer's bunker, you're greeted by this hologram projection of a girl. She dances, she sways, she plays with her hourglass. Had it been cut down, or maybe a little more subtle, it could feel like an underlying tone of a memory you weren't meant to see. Instead, it goes on for a while. You're left wondering what exactly you're supposed to be feeling. The music box melody in the background sounds worryingly ominous, but the visuals don't reinforce this. Why does this projection even appear to us? Who does it benefit to display this to Sam Porter Bridges? Because shortly after, we get an answer. The junk dealer expresses that it's quote-unquote his girl, who he hasn't seen in a long time. Now, ignoring the fact that I went a very, very long time thinking he meant this girl was his daughter, what with the childish playing and music box sounds in the background, I ask the important question: why did you show this to me, man? Are you okay? It's just weird, and it feels like the game doesn't know that it's weird. When you arrive at the cosplayer's bunker, it switches to her partner. Her partner, played and portrayed by Conan O'Brien, proceeds to lobby terrible puns and jokes your direction, landing with absolute crickets.
Wear it and you too can ride the river rapids without fear. Unless you're afraid of looking too sexy. Right? Really? Still nothing?
Perhaps the lack of laughter is supposed to feel like the punchline, but considering that Sam always stares up at these projected holograms in the exact same way with dead silence, how am I supposed to take this interaction? It's just bizarre. There are countless little moments in Death Stranding like this, yet there's one in particular that I find just egregious. Towards the tail end of this game, when you finally make it to Amelie.
Great. So I'm Mario and you're Princess Peach.
She hits you with this line.
Yeah. Like Mario and Princess Peach.
Princess Beach. And as they skipped along the beach, after all I had been through, I paused the game. I keeled over in befuddlement. I couldn't believe this was real. This scene is even more strange when I confess to you that the frolicking is interrupted by a much more serious scene just a little way further down the beach. I won't spoil anything for you, but just know that it is a scene building upon the foundation of this game's tragic twists and emotional backbone. And this is the moment that precedes that seriousness. It's just insane. But like I said, if you're in the game, if you've delved into its contents, if you are deeply immersed, some of that awkwardness washes straight over you. You forget about most of it by the end. It feels irrelevant. Out of context compilations are hilarious, and I bet they could be so easily obtained with the absurdity presented in this game. Yet despite the weird, that isn't what sticks with you by the end. Because for every time that this game feels unknowingly estranged, there are plenty of times where it loudly wears its charms on its sleeve. For example, it's well known Monster energy drinks used to litter the game's safe houses. But what I find far less discussed is that Sam's canteen, in which he drinks on command during deliveries, is a specially made canteen that converts all water it touches into Monster energy drink. It's insane. Product placement to an absurd degree, but knowingly so. When you sit on the toilet to make doo-doo, when you sit on the toilet to take a massive dump, an ad for Ride with Norman Reedus appears in order to block your view, but also provides a very silly motorcycle rev that disguises all possible fart noises. There is also a trike, the Ride type trike, that is branded with the Ride with Norman Reedus logo. When riding it, Sam might randomly mutter, "This bike is so cool, it should be on Ride with Norman Reedus."
This bike is so cool, it should be on Ride with Norman Reedus.
If all of this seems a little too silly for you, if you think that I'm attempting to load all of these things as a bullet to criticize the game, then I feel I need to remind you that we're talking about a game where a baby in a jar does a silly dance in one moment, and then Heartman explains a heartfelt story of how his family died the next moment. Video games are, by nature, kinda silly. It should be a little more recognized throughout their creation that there is inherent humor in giving us control of another human in a virtual world. Comedy is bound to be found. Comedy is bound to be created. How many countless videos of Arthur Morgan have we witnessed where there's just something hilarious about this serious man in a serious world doing very unserious things? It's hysterical every time. I certainly don't think there's anything wrong with leaning into that fact and taking full advantage of it, and I doubt there are many high-budget emotional games that wear its weirdness as proudly as Death Stranding. After you've spent as many hours with this game as I have, you may find yourself not only allowing the oddity sprinkled in to be to your taste, you may find yourself thirsting for more. The subsequent playthroughs were never diluted by the strange occurrences. They were instead enhanced. I didn't dread the cringy parts, I cheered for them. Even the bits I'm most critical of, I found myself longing to see them again, to be baffled by their inclusion. I longed for Princess Beach. At a certain point, I needed to confront this wacky world and realize that without these tiny nuggets of the bizarre, the world of Death Stranding wouldn't hit quite the same. The world, when viewed through the strange lens of Hideo Kojima, is just an interesting one that I long for. It gives a sense of bright-eyed whimsy to an otherwise dull world, and at some point, its inclusion needs to be recognized as an intelligent move. The America of Death Stranding's near future is one where humanity is recovering from its lowest point, its most afraid. The people are scared and without a vision of the future. The apocalypse is only one aspect of what makes this world so overwhelmingly depressive. If there wasn't a glimmer of some sort of something special going on, Death Stranding would have easily slipped into being similar to the grim nightmare futures that we've seen depicted countless times before and will continue to see countless times after. So when I watch BB kick around the path springs, I don't think about the impossibility of this action, I think about the pleasure that moment brings me, the smile that this absurdity causes me to crack. Without the weirdness, Death Stranding wouldn't shine with quite the same luster. It's evidence of something I can't fully wrap my own mind and sense of humor around. Yet, the game is better for it. After taking loads of orders, Sam can become fatigued. Slowly, the stamina bar will get smaller and smaller. The more innovating activities you put Sam through, the quicker you will burn through your reserves. Where once you were able to get a drink and restore some stamina, now the bar won't go any higher. The maximum capacity has lessened. This is your mechanical incentive to occasionally take a rest. When doing something strenuous such as clomping through a stream, that rest could simply be a full stop, allowing your bar of immediate fortitude to recover. But when dealing with your stamina reserves, your recovery process will need to be something stronger. The most readily available being that of a quick sit-down, wherever you are in nature. Doing so allows you to take in the scenery, massage your shoulders, or take a nap. Napping and resting take actual in-game time into account. There is no speed-up time lapse or a button to wake when fully rested. You sit the controller down and let Sam relax. I imagine there are some who would roll their eyes and lambaste the game for this kind of time-wasting implementations, but just like real life, this is never a requirement. It's a luxury, a small moment a player can soak up if that's what they want to do. And when I did it, I really felt that sense of euphoria I think it intended to give me. I looked around at the scenery, watched Sam settle into position, and relaxed. Sam's occasional word barks and breathing noises interrupted the peaceful silence.
Just a little longer.
But they always made me smirk or smile. The charm of the moment just managed to captivate me. However, a nap in nature isn't representative of true rest. Once again, the solution is only effective at first, but not for long. Thus, we must eventually make it to a bunker's private room. Most of the same places you deliver to contain a place for you to rest your head. If they don't, maybe a fellow player has constructed one nearby. Regardless of where, all private rooms look nearly identical. A flat bed, a shower pod that doubles as a toilet, a table of goodies, an opposing wall to gawk at your arsenal as it slowly increases over the game, and a little resting hub for BB. Where some games would be content with just having a room where you refill your stamina meter, maybe in a menu rather than a real place, Death Stranding goes above and beyond in a way very unexpected. The private room is a bizarre video game waiting room. The fourth wall is nearly smashed into pieces as Sam interacts with you, the player, which serves as an example amongst many where the game invites the player to be a participant rather than an observer. Zooming in on certain places can elicit reactions out of Sam. His feet tap and dance, he raises his arms to flex, he flips off the camera, he punches it for zooming in on his crotch one too many times. Taking him over to the mirror and sync allows you to coerce Sam into striking poses and making faces, giving you the opportunity to snap a photo via the mirror. Leading Sam over to BB can have the two interact with each other, Sam flicking the pod, BB responding with something silly or sad depending on the baby's mood. Inside the room, you can customize your gear, change the color of accessories you've earned, replay the battlefield bosses, shower, use the toilet, and even take advantage of Fragile's fast travel to other bunkers. After you've seen everything this room has to offer, I promise you, it's not nearly as exciting as it all sounds. But I don't think that's the point you should be focusing on. This is a room that exists for one simple purpose. It is the stop at the end of a hard journey, where we recoup and prepare to do it all again. Though, I encourage you to take note that the private room is so heavily loaded with an abundance of personality and charm. This isn't just where you go to simply refill your meter. This is the breathing room, a moment to escape the hostility of the outside world. In here, you are safe to relax. Safe rooms in a game like Resident Evil have a similar idea in concept. A place that, as soon as you hear the safe room's music begin to play, you may allow yourself some reassurance, a quick reprieve from the onslaught of tense action. Yet, where Kojima's safe room differs isn't just how excommunicated from the rest of the game the private room is. It's almost its own game in here. A room where you tend to your pet and play with him for a moment before you both head back out into the storm. But just to be clear, we aren't really messing around with Sam in this room. I think it's kind of evident that we're having a goofy time with Norman Reedus, Sam's actor. The actual production of the private room is a motion capture area where they told him to just go nuts and do stuff, and then they put it in the game. The fact that Norman's personality in this purgatorial space is so evidently different from Sam's doesn't come across quite as jarring as you'd imagine. Very quickly, the charm can wash over a player. Rather than trying to understand it, they may find interest in it, digging into every area, trying to find every quaint treat tucked into every corner. They put this in the game. They didn't have to. I bet some of them didn't even want to, but they did, and it's a better game for it. It's memorable, it's charming, it's an injection of something so clown shoes bizarre that it's here for no real reason other than why not? That's the kind of game we're dealing with here, a game that makes even taking a break from the game fun and interactive. Once more, grabbing the player by the hand and inviting them to be an active participant of the medium. When starting Death Stranding, you'll be given a few tools to help complete the job. Ladders and climbing anchors are the first of many tools to follow. Ladders get you up safely. Climbing anchors get you down securely. Both can be used in reverse, making them applicable to a plethora of unexpected situations. Once you start maneuvering through America, you realize that many other players are already using these tools in ways you may not have expected, like a ladder horizontally over a creek, or a climbing anchor to traverse through that same water. As the game continues, the toolbox expands exponentially. If you're asking me, the point of Death Stranding's delivery game is to traverse this world only a handful of times using these given tools, so that the next time you need to make a delivery, you'll fly right by your previously established route and laugh at its peasantry. And when I say fly, I mean literally. As I mentioned before, a zip line is the tool. Well, yes, you can build a safe house, a catapult, battery chargers, etc. It's all about the zip lines. There have been few greater thrills than the absolute dopamine rush of painstakingly setting up a series of zip lines based on line of sight and distance, connecting them to pre-established ones left by other players, and then hopping on those suckers on the way back. Woo! My heart's racing just thinking about it. And that's really where a lot of the depth of Death Stranding starts to truly turn into something resembling the average video game's definition of fun. This challenge, presented by that of nature, and then conquering that challenge through creativity and the technological resources provided to you. What's so good about it is found in that rush of using your brain to essentially solve a puzzle that some people may never even see as a problem. Because if you wanted to, you could completely ignore all tools and equipment. Just need my hiking boots and determination. Yet for reasons I will explain later, you're gonna want that perfect zipline back. Tools and their usefulness can sometimes become overshadowed by the newest gadget in the production line. Just like the real world and its constant evolution of technology, the old stuff can begin to get left behind and feel more and more useless. However, due to how the game operates on both its multiplayer systems as well as the chiral network only being operable in areas that you visited and connected, Death Stranding does a good job of balancing itself out for, at the very least, a player's first visit. The anchor and ladder are our bread and butter, and while they never become useless, I'd be lying if I said I didn't eventually ditch them. All of the elements that I've brought up previously are all coming into play here. The weight, the careful calculation of routes, and now the elements introduced through the equipment you choose to bring. Death Stranding is not a world so kind as to allow you to bring every possible option. Your back only has so much space, and every problem has a specific solution. So, do you take an arsenal arsenal of guns to mow down the BTs, even though those guns take up loads of space on your backpack? Or do you take tools that'll get you over rough terrain quickly and effectively? This constant balance not only causes you to consider what you're carrying when, but to also consider where it is that you're going next. If the zone ahead looks like a bunch of mountains and snow, you're gonna need to pack light, or find a way to move fast. If you're about to encounter BT zones and timefall, you better be ready to eliminate the BTs or else risk the health of your delivery. There probably is no perfect solution. There isn't necessarily meant to be one. In life, we make sacrifices. So too in the virtual world, we must make our choices and adapt to live with them. This game of improv, going back and forth with the world based on what you do or don't have, can be a very engaging element for players no matter the playstyle, allowing for a sense of freedom and personal expression as we all attempt to deal with personal problems in a myriad of ways. This isn't even with me mentioning some of the more advanced stuff Death Stranding throws your way, like a bridge you can begin to construct with your own materials and hard work, or leave unfinished to be completed by other players who believe in your vision. Another example is a timefall shelter to both hide from the dangerous downpour as well as repair damaged deliveries. Perhaps most groundbreaking of all, what about the floating carriers? Little platforms to help you carry additional items. If they're empty, you could even hop aboard and ride them like a skateboard. Buddybots too, with the ability to, and this stunned me, carry you to your destination. Only downside being the guaranteed lower grade performance, which is enough reason for me to have never used them. I'm gonna get an S rank on my mother's corpse, okay? Though I think I'd be a fool to leave this section without mentioning the biggest saving grace, the skeleton frames. Sam can equip these metal frames to his body, each with a speciality to them. The speed frame can't carry more weight, but it can give Sam a crazy burst of sprinting speed, covering an insane distance in a fraction of the time. Power skeletons are my favorite though, allowing Sam to carry loads more weight at the cost of both speed and the additional slots on Sam's legs that can usually carry smaller cargo. Despite that one being my favorite, the title of the most useful may go to the all-terrain skeleton. Its use most evident when crossing the large sections of the map covered in snow. Without the frame, Sam will struggle, sink, and burn through stamina. With it, the snow is barely an inconvenience. The power of these items is immense. The capabilities a player can unlock as they use them, not just exclusively, but in conjunction with each other, is where the real Death Stranding begins. The overcoming of nature through the adaptability of the human mind, body, and spirit. In an open-world game, the choice to include vehicles can be a rather rough crossroads. On the one hand, you give players the ability to traverse the game environment quicker, allowing them to hurry up and get to the best parts. This keeps the more attention-deficient minds from wandering and adds a new layer of engaging traversal. On the other hand, the likelihood of these vehicles getting overused is a near assurance, completely bypassing the game world and rendering an entire team's hard environmental design work kinda pointless. Death Stranding tackles this problem in a few interesting ways. Firstly, vehicles are kept from the player for a somewhat lengthy amount of time, allowing you to really get to know the on-foot fundamentals and maybe even start to appreciate them. The tools provided to the pedestrian player are so handy, encouraging you to actually want to use them in creative and rewarding ways. So by the time you get your hands on the standard vehicle, known as the reverse trike, you might actually find it's not the satisfying level up you were expecting. That's the next thing about vehicles. They aren't great. Trikes are kind of finicky, slamming into an awkward stop and start motion when traversing even the most mild of terrains. They shamefully possess a fairly unfriendly turn radius at top speeds, though I guess the good news is that the trike can actually start to show off its usefulness once you put in the long, resource-heavy effort of building a road. But before then, eventually, you unlock a truck, capable of hauling loads and loads of packages, resources, and equipment. The truck, however, is a boxy and awkward contraption that is even worse at maneuvering the new landscape of America. Its usefulness truly only shines once you take advantage of its carrying capacity. The truck vastly surpasses the capabilities of a simple backpack or trike in terms of completing big orders, but pales in comparison in terms of speed and off-road capabilities. Both vehicles possess a long-range version, with a much larger battery life life, but a lessened carrying capacity. The trike has 2 slots on its sides, capable of carrying larger cargo. With the long-range version, these slots are taken up by battery packs. When splashing through the many creeks found in the game, the vehicles will deplete battery much faster, meaning that even though they seem like a catch-all solution, you still are expected to observe your surroundings and plan accordingly. Your truck has lifts in it, allowing you to traverse through some moderately deep water, but both vehicles are privy to shutdowns and toppleovers should you attempt to brave waters marked with the Ultradex red X's. While vehicles aren't necessarily the mountain climbers you'd expect, they aren't useless. Aside from just helping speed up the zoom through a zone you've already cleared through once before, there's another area they excel in, and that's avoiding the mules. Mules and terrorists can pursue, fire upon, and disable a vehicle, but with the right usage, they're pretty powerless to stop you from plowing straight through one of their bases and out the other side to safety. The same cannot be said for our beached brethren. When you drive near a BT zone, you will get the usual shiver and camera shake. The vehicle itself will come to a full stop and even seemingly disable itself. A player might assume that their ride is over, and they must eject immediately, sneaking around the BTs on foot. However, that's not necessarily true. You can absolutely press on the gas, re-enabling the vehicle and pushing you forward. If you are brave, smart, and careful enough, you can absolutely drive your way past a BT-infested area. Doing it, though, could potentially take a lot of effort, because you're now in a position where you are noisier, unable to hold your breath in an emergency, and honestly, far less capable of avoiding danger. There are so few advantages to trying to zoom through one of these zones, but I think almost everyone tries at least once. In my first playthrough, the only reason I was ever caught was because of this simple experimental run of, I wonder if, only to ram straight into a BT, come to a full halt, then helplessly watch as the bike was sunk and stolen, and I'm dragged off for a boss fight. Vehicles are useful, truly, they are, but they're honestly not that well made, and I can't tell how on purpose that is or isn't. I believe that it's this way to ensure you can't go nuts on them and completely eradicate the walking mechanics, yet also, it could be argued that this whole game is about walking somewhere once or twice and then finding a way to never do that again. So what is or isn't intentional maybe isn't the point. Either way, the result ends up being a clunky but still useful tool set once you work within the strengths rather than attempting to force it to work the way you want it to. There were perhaps too many times where I found myself abandoning a vehicle after a brief ride, finding that the frustration it put me through wasn't worth the speed it could provide. Plenty more times than that, I found the constant slamming of the trike to be incredibly distracting. So often, I want to look around while on trike back, to spin the camera in my beautiful E3 demo sweeps that I so love to do. But the constant sound of hitting a tiny rock and hearing Sam let out a loud grunt of pain always has me fully broken in my immersion. At some point, bikes no longer held the vehicular beauty that other games have imbued. They were a guaranteed headache that I only used out of impatience, or assurance that where I was going would be a smooth ride. When you look at the trike, I think it's clear that this machine wasn't made for all-terrain. It certainly looks like a bike that belongs on the roads, what with its skinny, rigid tires and harsh metal frame. So perhaps I am the fool. Maybe it's my bad for thinking the bike would ever provide the liberties of an all-terrain vehicle. Yet, when I imagine a version of this game that contains that distant mind image of an ATV, I long for it. I truly wish the vehicles could have been smoother. If that comes at the sacrifice of them being slower, then very well. If they needed to be more fragile to balance it out, then so be it. Whatever it would have taken, I would have really preferred to have fallen in love with the vehicles of this game, but in the end, I found myself disappointed. It's not enough to ruin the experience, and certainly not enough to make me discount the benefits that they provide, yet it was enough to make me fully believe that vehicles have always been my strongest complaint in regards to the gameplay of Death Stranding. Perhaps the only saving grace is the ride with Norman Reedus version that makes me chuckle occasionally. That would be if it wasn't for the director's cut version of Death Stranding, which adds an extremely unforeseen addition. After a point in the game that I don't recall, you receive an email. The email ushers you to go rebuild something over by the Timefall farm. Just as you would with rebuilding a road, you lug some ceramics and metals over to it. After successfully providing its necessities, a racetrack is built. The racetrack really opened my eyes on a few things. Firstly, there's a drift button. Didn't know that. Sure would have been useful on some of the more curvy areas of the chiral highways. Oddly, however, the drift input isn't the brake button. It isn't a double tap on the gas. Both do cause a response that, for a while, had convinced me it was a drift. Maybe it would be classified as the world's worst drift ever, but it was still maybe something. With the realization that the trike has more mechanics than I had initially realized, I felt like maybe the vehicle controls of the game had some more hope than I had surmised. Most all fears are put to rest when you try out the races starring the newest vehicle in our roster, the Roadster. Like its name implies, the Roadster is a low-stanced vehicle meant to go fast and take tight turns. Nearly every touch of the stick causes it to lift off of one of its set of wheels, giving it a drifty feeling on every micro-adjustment. While I wouldn't love this effect in a racing game, it does spark a joy that was sorely lacking in this game. The Roadster also has the ability to do a full drift that can be a little tricky to nail, but once mastered, clearly contains the potential a speed demon craves. The Roadster alone is the reason why I highlight the racetrack. After rounding the course with it once, you unlock the ability to fabricate it. While I wouldn't suggest you go buck wild with this thing in nature, I don't think you've truly fallen in love with the highways of this game until you hit them with this stylish speed vehicle. My only regret is that I didn't discover this sooner. The reality of modern video games is a very different beast from the decades previous. That is a statement that, as soon as I make it, the older audiences will race to agree with. But we may all reach that conclusion in a variety of different ways. Some might say that games today are made more like movies. One might claim that modern games are more interested in recycling what previous games got right instead of being their own source of creativity. I guarantee most will be willing to submit to the most simple form of discussion on this matter, the easy argument that games today just don't feel the same as they once did. The vibes of an early era PlayStation game just hit different. The worlds in those games had a sort of state of being to them that could enrapture a young mind. Though the argument could easily be made that it is us who have changed, I think even the most skeptical of us would still agree that a recent game's final product just isn't similar to what they once were. For example, did you have a game when you were younger that you sunk so much time into that you had felt like a sort of master over it? Your friends would be impressed when you showed them things they had never seen. You flaunted your favorite glitches and bugs that you could recreate with 100% certainty. Or maybe more mindfully, you just loved this game and really felt like you had milked it of all it had to offer. Then one day, something new hits your lap, an unlockable you never got, a cutscene variant that you had never witnessed before, a huge revelation that should have been obvious to a veteran like you, and yet, somehow, it was a blind spot in your vision. When I was a smaller hare, I had this sort of thing happen a lot. Games that I had dumped hours into only to realize I had barely scratched the surface. Characters and objects I didn't encounter. Conversations I never had. It can sometimes be a blow to the near impervious ego of a child, though other times it can be a gentle reminder that this thing you love is even more incredible than you gave it credit for. I think as we have stretched into the future of gaming, we've lost a piece of this. The details that make up a digital world, they're still there. They still deserve immense praise. Yet, what games don't often do is ride the very controversial line of having things that a player might miss out on. Details so massive that they can greatly change an experience, but an experience so full that a player may never notice them when absent. Death Stranding stands in rarefied opposition to the modern movement of making every piece of content unmissable. Emails will point out odd things to go back and look out for in a specific location. Going there provides no HUD alert. There is no Ubisoft checklist box waiting to be checked. Sometimes it's completely unclear what the reason for your revisit even is. Were the emails just spinning some sort of ghost story? Or was it a gamified way of telling the player they should go back for something? Some bunker locations are not marked on the map. No one ever has an order for these places. They are ghosts, were you to just normally play through the game 100% every bunker and earn their stars for your leg collection, there would only be the smallest evidence that you have missed something. I guarantee most people completed this game and never once came in contact with some of these more obscure locations. One of the only ways to know they even exist is to wander into their territory, realize there's no chiral network here, and then find a lost cargo, its recipient being a prepper you've never met. Perhaps more interesting to me is not what the 100%er would have missed, but instead what the more casual player definitely didn't get to see. As you complete orders for locations, you rank up in their estimates, earning their trust until eventually they gift you their star for your completionist collection. Along the way though, these people will provide you with smaller trinkets. As you rank up with a specific location, they gift you something usually specific to them. If you don't keep returning to these places, you'll not only never unlock these additional items, you won't even know they exist. And perhaps the most interesting part to me is that you could hit the credits of this game and remain completely none the wiser. Sometimes these preppers give you upgrades to things you already have, such as the roboticist giving you a level 2 and 3 versions of the all-terrain skeleton. If you didn't make the painfully slow trek back up the highest mountains to return to her, you would never even know that you could unlock that better equipment. Better equipment that, ironically, would make that trip up to her even easier. Through these gifts, you can unlock more colors for vehicles and accessories. Unlocking these also gives alternative versions of stuff you already have, including my favorite example, the Ride with Norman Reedus trike. Additionally, some players may go the entire game confused why the backpack allows you to customize the accessory dangling off of it if there's only one, the windmill. The other little dangly guys are obtained through these acts of prepper generosity. In this way, the game incentivizes you to keep using its systems to the fullest, but what I find so bold is how hidden this incentive mechanic is. Like I said, were a player to just blitz through this game carelessly, they'd never see these additional items. That being said, if that's the kind of player they are, they probably aren't one to even enjoy that kind of incentive. With this, the game manages to continue allowing players to play at their desired pace, rewarding the intuitive and patient with trinkets that they'd likely have the personality to appreciate. But more than these elements that affect gameplay, I attempt to usher praise towards the smaller details for a completely different reason. Is it cool that you can unlock alternate versions of the stuff you already have? Yeah, of course. Just the same, I find myself more impressed by that which the game gives you in addition. At first, it's just a hat, some sunglasses, and an otter hood. However, more importantly to me than those, something so small and simple that I bet even those who unlocked it forgot about its existence: the harmonica. The harmonica is such a missable item, given to you by a missable character, activated in a missable menu for your attire, used only in moments that a player could completely miss the opportunity to perform. The harmonica is functionally pointless. It's just a fun addition to add to this digital world and give you the chance to play a little lullaby while you rest. To me, it's not what the harmonica is that brings me joy, it's what it represents. A tiny, insignificant detail in a world that allows me as a player to stop and express myself. An unnecessary addition to a game already bursting at the seams with content, small and pointless. Yet as soon as I discovered I had missed it, I found myself hurt that I hadn't searched this game hard enough. Simultaneously, though, I was excited that there was something left for me to seek out. More game to play, more orders to do, something left to see in a reality I thought myself familiar with. Some games are rather simple in their progression. At least, on paper, they are simple. You start small and work your way up, starting with one weak weapon, only to end with an arsenal of powerful options. As the game goes on, you get into the rhythm. The controls make more and more sense. The options you have become second nature. By the time you reach the end, you are facing the challenge on a progressed level as it has slowly ramped up the difficulty to match the flow you have entered throughout your journey. Death Stranding is scarcely any different. You have your starting equipment, and by the end, you have upgraded and advanced to equipment that can begin to overshadow your pathetic starting tools. Where this game breaks away from the norm, however, is in terms of progression. In Death Stranding, you will certainly begin to find your rhythm. The constant groove of the package delivering quest will settle in as you find yourself applying previous logic and overcoming nature's odds through your experience. A lesson learned quickly is that no journey should be wasted. Should you need to go across the map, you might as well deliver packages along the way. You pack yourself up, deciding how to tackle the next series of challenges based on what lies ahead and behind. When entering new zones, disconnected from the chiral network, you will be without online assistance and unable to create your own advanced structures. In this way, you will have to rely on the fundamentals: your 2 feet, ladders, ropes, and maybe a well-behaved vehicle if you're lucky. The trudge into new territory can be scary. That groove you had settled into while in the familiar territory has to be put on the back burner. But that pause in the familiar pales in comparison to the moments in this game that truly halt progress. Many times it feels like a linear level of progression. You conquer a new zone, you grab some orders for the trail back, you sail into the next new area and do it all again. Except when you don't. There's a few locations in the game where you visit and someone doesn't sign up with Bridges immediately. You need to complete a task to earn their trust, to convince them to join the UCA and connect to the network. There's one location though that comes at the end of a particularly dangerous journey through harsh weather, a nasty swamp, a terrorist camp, possibly some snow, and a BT zone, only to get there and to be completely denied. Thanks for the package. Now leave. You stand there, almost feeling naked, no order to bring back. You are about to be forced to make the treacherous journey in reverse, empty-handed. The rhythm hasn't just been interrupted. The song didn't skip a beat. The record has scratched, and you're left standing in silence. You must now make the journey all the way back with nothing to show for your efforts. This is just one moment amongst many. Another will even have you complete several orders without your precious co-pilot. While BB goes through some life-saving procedures, you are babyless in the snow, bottlenecked into a nature-made hallway with BTs surrounding you. Without BB, you can barely detect the dark creatures. You are forced to use all your remaining senses and every ounce of fearful patience to somehow carve a safe path through the lonely nightmare or submit to failure. Death Stranding knows when to apply the brakes on your progression and demand you play with the training wheels once more, never letting you get too far to remember your roots. The fundamentals being your foundation and their importance being emphasized. The ingenious inclusion of these events takes me off guard even on replay, but nonetheless excites me, forcing me to lean forward and lock in, demanding my engagement in a game that's easy to get swept up in the monotony. With a gameplay loop this seemingly mundane, you would imagine it would be simple to find yourself swept up in the mindless procedure. Indeed, that comfortability is very alluring. However, the game doesn't always allow you to be so comfortable. Some orders are fragile, requiring you to hold the cargo in your hand at all times and take a little more care in your actions. Some have a timer, forcing you to speed up and apply mental pressure. The most baffling orders are those containing VOG and antimatter. Should the VOG container take too much damage, you will find yourself in a poisonous cloud. Should the antimatter package get rattled too much, you'll find yourself at a game over screen. Both sound rather stressful and frustrating, and make no mistake, they are. Yet there is no order quite as intriguing as the most interesting break from the norm: Peter Englert's Pizzas. A suspiciously poignant name with a suspicious craving. Mr. Englert occasionally will send Sam an email requesting that he deliver a pizza to his personal bunker. Pizza orders operate under rules that are shockingly exclusive to them and them alone. A pizza must lay flat. You can't allow it to tilt. Thus, you cannot carry it, and worse than that, you must be mindful of how it is placed on your back. If you allow the game to automatically organize your things, it may only take into account the pizza's size and place it vertically. If you have nothing on your backpack, the pizza will similarly have nowhere to go but upright. This means you must strategically waste space and resources as you attempt to make a place for the pizza to lay flat. Or you could just use the floating carriers that the game gives you. I don't know why I never thought of that until now. Like, that's specifically what it says to do. These deliveries have such a deep mechanical shakeup that I'd imagine the uninitiated are believing them to be common. They are not. There are only 4 one of those pizza deliveries, always to the same place, but never starting in the same location. Each one getting further and further, all of them timed. Every delivery is achieved without anyone present to confirm it. When you walk away, an email is sent, apologizing for missing your presence. Just missed you. I was out doing something for my wife, you see. But honestly, who goes out in this weather, in this world? The last pizza delivery unlocks the private room underneath this mysterious man's bunker, revealing his secrets. Alongside that is an iconic moment where Death Stranding asks the player to perhaps pause and do something they usually might not. When one package fails to dispense through the usual mechanical procedures, a human being hand delivers it to Sam. The guy's weird, suspicious even. Just the fact that he's out and walking around should be enough to make you unnerved. When you receive the package and go into the menu where you'd usually just carry on, business as usual, something in here may tip you off. One of many things may give you reason to apply the brakes and observe. At no other point in the game does Death Stranding request this level of analysis from you. Admittedly, not even this moment asks that of you. In fact, should you desire, you may carry straight on and deliver the package like every other order, though I certainly wouldn't suggest it. That is an example of a moment within the story. There are several other abnormal distractions that are a little more extracurricular in their nature, such as an investigation into an old locked-up Bridges bunker, added with the director's cut. This section of gameplay is incredibly short, but certainly a worthy departure from what the rest of Death Stranding provides. The bunker can be found very early in the game. Accessing its deeper areas comes later. The deeper you venture, the clearer the picture becomes. If I may be so bold, I think the foundation for what will be Death Stranding 2 is laid here, in an area that is admittedly jarring in its occasionally flippant tone mixing.
A cardboard box? Why are you... I don't know, I was just looking at it, and suddenly I got this irresistible urge to get inside.
With what might be the most serious portion of this game's underlying plot. Throughout the experience, Death Stranding doesn't quite allow a player to grow complacent. After you begin to settle into what it has gotten you comfortable with, it switches the channel. Where this sometimes leads to me dreading particular sections of the game, I do believe that they inevitably provide an overall rewarding resolution. Without these shakeups, Death Stranding would have remained as simple as some perceive it to be on its surface. With them, I found myself pleasantly surprised and engaged even on my 200th hour. Now, it can't all be good. If I were to spearhead one piece of criticism towards this masterpiece, it is this. Death Stranding will elaborate on everything, far beyond a point that is necessary, which is ironic considering we are talking about a game initially hyped up on mystery, uplifted by its confusing trailers. And I certainly don't want anyone to think that this game isn't confusing. It is. You will be confused and stay confused on many topics for a long time. Many moments of just crafting this video have been me searching for clarification on a few things that the game never addresses. Like, why is it that a young Bridget wears a mask? If it's to conceal her identity, I don't think it's doing a very good job. Death Stranding is, at times, quite uninterested in explaining some of its smaller stuff, design elements and details being chief among these unexplained aspects. Yet, when it comes to the bigger picture stuff, oh boy, you're gonna get an earful. It is amazing to watch cutscenes range anywhere from momentary to movie length. Characters do not just say, I have a tragic backstory. They explain those stories in full. If Hartman is on screen, expect him to speak at length about his theories on what's currently happening. And when it's time to hear someone's monologue, even Sam may find himself getting long-winded. None of these are an issue. I love these. I love my little movies within a video game. It's not just a Kojima staple at this point. I genuinely find it interesting. The cutscene as a vehicle for information isn't as effective as gameplay, but it isn't something I'd criticize any game for either, especially not a game with this much depth to its gameplay mechanics. No, the problem lies with some smaller aspects that originally seemed quite broad, the game's themes. In the lead up to the game, the stick and rope theory was discussed as the predominating theme of Death Stranding. Other games have served us the stick. Now, Kojima gives us the rope. Initially, I thought this to be a clever anecdote, Kojima reaching deep into philosophy and creating art around it. I wrongly expected this to remain something brought up in interviews as the foundation for the concept phase of Death Stranding, but not quite. It's not only mentioned in the story, it's repeated multiple times, to the point that it's severely unavoidable. No longer a fun bonus concept, but an actual theory being discussed by the world's characters. Certainly not egregious by itself. Please hold. The Egyptian concept of people being formed by their Ka, the spirit, and Ha, the body, is something I hadn't heard of before this game. Once again, in the initial phases before Death Stranding's release, I thought this was going to be something Kojima had used as heavy inspiration. Perhaps he would include Egyptian symbolism to subtly reference it, keeping it as a theme that influences the narrative but doesn't necessarily enter into it. Instead, we find that Ha and Ka are repeatedly mentioned, not just as Egyptian religious theories, but as the bread and butter rules of this world. There factually is a Ha, and there factually is a Ka. The Egyptians got it right, and people in this world are very aware of these concepts. By the end of the game, I assure you, you will also be so aware of it that you may forget a time when you had never heard of these words. It's not over though. What really begins to drive me up a wall is a little spoilery, but I'm going to tiptoe on it like eggshells. I think it's really important when creators put a lot of thought and time into their characters characters. They put purpose behind their appearance, their personality, and even their names. I have plenty of my own characters. They're typically named after people I know. It's a very simple approach, but one that I find effective. Were I to really put forth the maximum effort, I think I'd spend time researching names, their origins, their meaning, and eventually matching them up with characters that are befitting those titles. After all, our names mean something, you know? Samantha America Strand, most commonly referred to as Amelie, is certainly an interesting character. Out of all inhabitants of this world, she is our push and our pull. She has a control over Sam that no one else contains. When we near the end of the game, we begin to question a lot about her. Kojima, a fan of double entendres and words that have many meanings, didn't stop being clever with just the word strand. My annoyance would never lie in the department of his cleverness, of course. However, I do find myself rolling my eyes when these clever inclusions are spelled out for us with blatant disregard. Amelie literally sits us down and busts out the whiteboard to give us a tutelage on what her name means in terms of the narrative. And it's just one of many moments where I would have felt so much more passion and enjoyment had the game let me and other players come to this conclusion ourselves rather than beating us over the head with just how clever everything really is. This problem extends beyond the narrative though. Death Stranding repeatedly has characters tell you something, fade into gameplay, then repeat that exact same thing as if you weren't paying attention. Sometimes it's not even the same character. Hartman will explain something and give instructions, only for Die Hard Man to cut in immediately after and repeat nearly the exact same line. Got a new item from a prepper? Oh good! There's a good chance they will explain it to you. Then you'll scroll over it in the menu, seeing as how it's put in the front as a new item, complete with 2 versions of a written description. But that's certainly not enough. Here's Mama to explain it in more familiar terms. Should you have subtitles on, this means that you will technically read about this item 3 times in a row. More than one explanation for an item you may never even want to use. To get through any of these talking segments is a time-sucking nightmare. Many times I find myself mashing like a madman trying to move on to the mission. I'm in full support of everything having a reason. I'm so happy that Kojima has the platform to subject me to his crazy ideas and philosophical findings. However, everything in this game becomes less and less interesting the more and more it is elaborated on. The dozens of emails and piles of in-game interviews and articles is amazing in terms of intriguing optional content, but then the repetition in the active gameplay world tends to border on annoying. One of the many reasons I had never made this video before this moment is because I genuinely didn't know if there was anything I could say. This game seems to contain the ability to speak for itself. Moments like these, where characters over-explain things that would have been more enticing had they been unsaid, have only made me more and more afraid of this video's creation. I assure you, not even 200 hours is going to make you a game mechanical genius. 200 hours will not be enough time for you to fully soak in and retain all the information this game attempts to lodge inside your brain for half a decade. I am your shining example of that. The reason I call for this criticism so strongly is because this problem takes a work that could be so very subtle in its messaging and makes it annoyingly vocal. I admire Metal Gear Solid not just for its standout moments, but its subtlety. The ability we, as players, get to possess where we can observe and analyze it as a piece of art. This game is unmistakably art. There is clearly plenty for me to observe and elaborate on. Yet if the game does that for us, I think it loses some of that luster. When you explain so much, you eliminate room for interpretation. It is that interpretation that ties an individual to that thing they love. I try very hard to displace these elaborations from my mind because I want to love this game despite itself. Obviously, I spoke briefly about Death Stranding's inclusion of pre-made tracks from Low Roar, which provide such an abundance of atmosphere and really develop the tone beyond visuals. The songs given, those of Low Roar, as well as other musical artists, go beyond that of a usual musical inclusion in a video game, and instead help establish the video game world in a certain vibe. I think I throw that word around often, but there's really few other ways I can describe the feeling it evokes without eventually losing the simplicity of this relationship. spaceship. The music kicks in rather rarely, but when it does, it enhances a moment and sweeps you into the feeling. The camera typically pulls out to really make you feel a weightless freedom to the experience. And I can tell that the public really responded to these moments the way they are intended to just by looking at YouTube. Compilations of these moments, ambient shots of the environment with low roar playing in the background. The soundtrack adds a lot, but were it completely absent, I don't believe that the game would have felt soulless. To observe the music in this game exclusively from that of the collaborative works would be to neglect the pure genius going on in the background. Perhaps more subtle, maybe less memorable, but inarguably the most effective. Ludwig Forssell, or Ludwig if you're a Yank. Swedish composer and audio director at Kojima Productions showed his immense capabilities with tracks like Quiet's Theme and The Phantom Pain in Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain, but I joyously argue that his work over there pales in comparison to that of his work in Death Stranding. Sometimes it can go completely unnoticed. The music in Death Stranding is mostly rather subtle. On long journeys through the wide, barren world of the game, you can sometimes completely forget that utter silence is abnormal in the realm of digital entertainment. However, these moments of silence only help to reinforce and enhance the moments when the musical performances kick in. Cutscenes are given immense weight. Characters' lengthy speeches feel compelling. Moments of heightened tension feel even more anxiety-inducing. While the sound design is certainly to thank for the immersiveness of every moment, those moments' effectiveness are sealed by the final foundational layer made up by Forssell's compositions. However, let's not stop there. There's a marriage of sound design and music within this game that I don't feel like is often encountered. When you begin to notice it, one might begin to wonder why every game hasn't taken full advantage of this simple opportunity. Every character in the game, every small contribution, every continuous action is certainly preceded or followed by a sound. Yet this game takes immense pride in its motifs. I won't sit here and pretend I know anything about music, but what I will tell you is that this game could easily be the bridge between me and wanting to learn more. Because even I, uneducated and foolish, can detect the ear-wiggling patterns implemented in this game and find them so ingenious. Each character that calls you on the cufflinks or over comms has a jingle specific to them. Each one clearly thought out. Even without looking into it, there's one that even I can recognize. Hartman, a character who, for all intents and purposes, is dead, has a rapid version of the funeral march. To me, that's all the evidence I need to realize that they all have some sort of intention, even if I'm too dense to grasp them. What I'm not too dense to grasp is London Bridge. The iconic and simple children's song is used as Bridge's jingle. On the surface level, it's because of bridges. On a deeper level, it's a disturbing foreshadowing of Bridge's potential fate, the reconstruction of a monument for the singular, fated purpose of its inevitable downfall.
London Bridge is falling down.
Likewise, the standout track from the entire game is the lullaby sung by Cliff to his BB. BB's theme is a song that transcends this game. When standing alone as a composed melody, it makes for a remarkably memorable track. However, its implementation throughout the game is what should be admired most. Cliff sings it to his BB. We, the player, see this occur at the same time Sam is seeing it, during the strange memory feedback we get when plugging into BB. As the game goes on, Sam can spontaneously bust out a version of this tune himself. At first, he struggles, either a bad whistler or failing to remember how it goes. Yet, as the game continues, the game takes extreme advantage of the joyous simplicity of this lullaby, playing it as a jingle for many different interactions. By the time you get to the end of the tale, you'll likely know the jingle by heart, which is excellently done considering you won't hear the full track in all of its glory until the story's closing moments. By then, the emotional weight and significance of the entire experience will have amplified the impact of the song, creating a feedback that displays the perfect marriage this game masters in terms of audio and its relation to Death Stranding overall. Death Stranding is a lock-in travel and struggle simulator that takes Sam from the east coast of America to its most western point. The goal from moment one is to reach the last destination, plug in the internet, and save the princess. You'll find yourself potentially shocked to learn that just because you reach this point doesn't mean the game is over. In fact, the credits aren't until several hours later. Death Stranding spins you in the opposite direction and, for reasons explained in narrative, asks you to run it back. Where plenty of video games in the past have attempted to reuse assets and stretch out their runtime with this backtracking method, Death Stranding is not to be lumped in with these fellow forms of entertainment. Because the game isn't just asking you to do it again, it's basically giving you a sort of skill check. There are multiple bosses in this last runback segment. There is a dramatic fistfight lovingly lifted from the lessons learned from MGS4. There are plenty more surprises contained within this last several hours of gameplay. Yet, to me, this runback is the true final boss. Bosses in games are traditionally skill checks. Here is a new item or weapon. Here are some enemies to get you used to it. Now, apply those to a much harder opponent who will test the skills you've learned and make them a bit more permanent. Bosses, when used in this manner, are a way to instill the lessons learned one step at a time over the course of a playthrough, slowly ramping up in difficulty and checking more and more skills until you are applying your full arsenal properly against an enemy, putting them to the test. To me, this last run is the true final boss. If that still confuses you, consider it like this. Over the course of your playthrough, how many obstacles did you face? How many of those obstacles did you overcome with the many tools provided? How much effort did you put in to establish a series of zip lines? How many countless hours of agony did you donate towards the construction of a road system running throughout the mountains and treacherous fields? If the answer to any of these questions is none, then you have not learned. You did not evolve, and now you will suffer. The trek back requires at least a small journey into these snowy mountaintops. All mules are now replaced with the lethal terrorists. All BT zones are filled with surprises and even more hostility. Had you blasted from one order to the next without any sense of foresight for future deliveries, you would find yourself at a disadvantage as the game gives you its strongest skill check. However, for those more fortuitous, the run back is an exciting blitz as you sail over BT zones, zoom straight through areas that once gave you pause, and ride your hard-earned road to victory. This is the reward, the payoff. But then, another twist. Sam is sucked into one more battlefield, barely making it out and finding himself in the game's first zone. The run back resumes, but this time, things are different. Timefall, in your absence, has been going haywire. All of your previously placed structures, tools, and equipment have deteriorated, making the trip feel like quite the opposite to its first half. Though hope isn't yet lost, you will find yourself now relying on the generosity of your fellow porters. Their tools remain, bouncing from one battery charger to the nearest Timefall shelter, struggling to keep your package alive as every BT zone is now an instant boss arena. With the network on the fritz, you are unable to fabricate equipment yourself, meaning that every fight is either a hopeless scramble to collect other players' items and fight back, or the more sensible option of bailing out of every encounter. Regardless, the final run comes to an end where it all began, with one final fight you cannot run from. After everything, it's the final culmination of all your lessons learned, and the application of these lessons. Everything we've discussed previous put to the test, and whether prepared or otherwise, a player will be potentially put through the ringer, rewarded with what are several satisfying final moments of gameplay. Once, on the wide world of the internet, I witnessed a user express their opinion that video games have a climax problem. I sought no further clarification, as I imagined what the argument sounded like in my own mind. I nodded, realizing just how correct this person likely was. It's true. Video games typically end just after the climax. Of course, there is a cutscene after you beat the final boss, and plenty of times that cutscene reveals where our player character is going in the future. Yet, that is still a resolution placed immediately after the climax. My mind wanders to some of my favorite experiences in gaming that have so commonly pulled this trick off. A massive, hyped-up battle with some sort of immaculate soundtrack, a final boss that pushes you to your limit, then the final cutscene, and then credits. It has been this way for so long that I have never once considered it as something to even really observe. In fact, I feel like there's part of me that would have argued that plenty of games give you the falling action and resolution in that final cutscene. I would have happily gone to bat for video games, saying that they are emotionally and narratively satisfying without that pesky final beat on the traditional narrative journey. Then I replayed this game for the sake of collecting footage for this video, and I realized something. Death Stranding doesn't have a climax problem. After the runback, after the multiple bosses it forces you to face, the game comes to an emotional conclusion and readies itself to end its narrative in the place you might imagine they would. But something unexpected occurs. The credits roll over gameplay. For reasons I won't specify, you continue playing. Then, after that's wrapped up and the game comes to a well and true ending, it gives you one last order. The last order is not arduous. It's not challenging. I certainly wouldn't describe it as a victory lap. It's just one more order that follows the exact same path as your very first order. By now, the player and Sam both have evolved so much that the trip is trivial. Its purpose in the narrative is the heavy part. The last order is our falling action. We see how the journey has changed us, and Sam as well. We can tell when Sam doesn't reject the touch of those he now cares for. We can clearly feel it in our actions. It's odd, because I really can imagine a world where I would have argued that games need to continue ending at the climax, because the gameplay and replayability are important to an interactive narrative. If you feed the players a narrative conclusion that wastes their inputs, they may turn their noses up, leaving the game with a sour taste in their mouths. Perhaps that's how they would remember the game, not as an emotionally satisfying work of art, but as something that slowly plonked its way to a resolution. However, I see now, through Death Stranding, how potentially wrong that version of me would have been. This final stroll through the world is one last goodbye. It is so very vital to this game's tone and essential in establishing its long-lasting image. Were this moment missing, this game would be lesser for it. Had these last instances been reduced to that of a cutscene, I would have not walked away from this experience as moved as I was. I have remained on my best behavior and not revealed what the narrative implications of this last trek into the mountains is for, but I can assure you that those who know, those of us who felt Death Stranding's final moments deep within our chest, may never forget the impact. I think, were you to go into this game with the intention of hitting credits on it, you might not find what makes it so pleasurable. Furthermore, I imagine that if you approached every delivery with a strained frustration at every trip and stumble on your way to the finish line, you might misinterpret what makes the experience so special. When Sam begins his journey, he is a character, lost and broken. He has no real purpose, just a man making deliveries because that's what he can do. When characters approach him and attempt to connect with him, he backs away. Sam shrugs off the constant insistence from so many characters that life could be more if he just accepted the optimism surrounding him. As a player, I think we too could easily get lost in the potential dopamine rush of completing deliveries and watching numbers go up. More likes, more stat buffs, more stars to put on our leg. However, I think the game has something to say about this, even if it is subconscious at times. At the end of the narrative, the game insists to Sam that he is a changed man, that he has learned to love, and after connecting so many lives, he embraces a vulnerable side that allows him to let others in. If you're blitzing through the game at a veteran gamer's pace, I think you would miss the moments where you can tell he's changing. The game itself, by its very nature, has so many elements that encourage you to take pause. A literal input to rest is a function you have available at all times. Looking over the edge causes a vertigo effect as the camera shakes a little. Sam whistles and can play harmonica. He can sing to BB when taking a bath. Should you take your time, you'll find countless lovely spots that are just fun to vibe in. Little areas of the map crafted to feel natural, but clearly representative of an area of respite. Death Stranding is made to be taken slowly. It is crafted in a way that implores you to slow down. I believe that Death Stranding is the journey far more than it is the destination. What did reaching that way station truly mean if you didn't have to struggle to get there? Would you be relieved when your little robot hand gives you a thumbs up if you hadn't just sneaked past a horde of ghosts? What joy would you find in getting to a mountain's peak if you hadn't just stomped through the snow to reach it? Would the thrill ring hollow when riding a zipline system if you didn't personally plot it out? What would be so grand in achieving victory if there wasn't a crushing defeat to push you to that point? There is so much beauty in this game, and it would all be pointless if this experience was merely about walking from point A to point B. It's not about the points, it's the journey that matters. The struggle is what defines the destination's value. Death Stranding finds this to be true and distills it into a playable format that makes even the most homebodied of individuals like myself appreciate the smaller things in reality all the more. Tiny details transposed into the game certainly do broaden it. They make it feel more like a lived-in world. Without them, the setting begins to ring hollow and the game appears shallow. More impressive than the details of Death Stranding's world is the amount of details that went into Sam Porter Bridges himself. I don't just mean in terms of the physical. Yes, it certainly does add this bizarre layer of believability when you look at Norman's tattoos added to Sam's body. More than that, you can witness the work of sympathetic pain a player can derive from seeing Sam's irritated and sore skin from the areas his straps pull the hardest. Should you not watch your shoe's durability, that sympathetic pain can get even more unsavory. If we wanted to, I could easily go over Sam's entire structure, commenting on all that makes him the most convincing video game protagonist of modern gaming, but it's not the physical charms that sway me. Sam has something to him that is so natural and unique that the average player likely glosses over it, fooled by the illusion of immersive experience. Idle stances have existed in gaming for ages. I imagine that some of us have little idle movements that come to mind, whether it's just the lurking lifts and sinks of heaving breaths, or it's the cartoonish relaxation of the main character, realizing they are relinquished from player input. Idle stances add a personality to a character that can tell you an immense amount of information about their existence. Their mood is elaborated via their movement independent to the controller. More than just being their personality, it is what convinces us they are living creatures. Breathing, moving, shifting their weight, or even just being in a ready stance makes them more than just pixels rendered on a screen. Animation is what takes them from being a flat image to being something we can more easily empathize with. In Death Stranding, Sam has animations that take him far beyond that of an average video game character. Not only does he have plenty of different idle animations, but he is also constantly readjusting his equipment, rolling his shoulders, shaking off the rain and cold. When just walking around, Sam is able to fully convince the audience that he has so much more independence than the average video game protagonist. After a while, I'm sure some players may even find it annoying. The way that Sam slows down to feel some relief as he nears the end of a long journey, the manner in which he stops and has to breathe heavily if a player has been putting him through too much. It's control that, while subtle, is still taken out of your hands. It can be a little frustrating after a while, but that's after the charm has worn off. The impressiveness perhaps only lasts as long as you are willing to stomach it, like a magician showing magic tricks outside of his show, away from the stage. Perhaps being wowed only works when you want to be wowed. That being said, the small movements in the open world don't really compare to the mild movements performed in the private room. All of Norman's subtle movements, there are so many details that were added into this section that a player may not even truly recognize that they're happening at all. They do not always demand much attention. Sometimes they do. Mostly, they don't. Once again though, the charm of it can eventually wear off. You get so focused on playing a video game for video game's sake that these little elements wash over you. It's not that they're annoying, just that you don't even notice them. Flashes of something passing by the window on the speeding journey down the track. However, if you allow yourself to soak it in, the magic works immensely well. There is no character as married to their actor as Sam, because these small movements weren't planned. They were improvised. Well, I mean, calling them improvised is still giving them an undeserved credit. These small ticks that Sam has are just the small ticks that Norman Reedus has. He just did things and Kojima saw their idle importance, insisting he do it again while cameras were rolling. The most important aspects of this world to me are not important because of their bigger picture. It is the bigger picture made up by smaller details. These small brush strokes made with significant intention that eventually make something larger than any one brush stroke could. Details aren't just important. They are both the foundation of art as well as its finishing touches. I think it's kind of clear that I could go on talking about this game forever. There are just so many small aspects of it that beg to be dissected. There are massive concepts that bubble to the surface of the average discussion. There's so much to unpack that I'm scared that I have forgotten to address something. At the same time though, I know I can't say it all, and even if I did, I'm not sure what that would achieve. Because I can describe to you the process of making deliveries, but that description doesn't actually equate to the moment-to-moment actions. Words can barely scratch the surface of the intimacy you form with a game like this as you wrestle with its rules and systems. I can describe to you the emotional journey of our characters and where their stories lead, but that won't form the proper attachment. You'll feel a hollow relationship, a cardboard cutout of the conceptual character, without any of the traits that make them feel like people. I could try my hardest to describe the euphoria I received from just getting to the top of a mountain and staring out into the field beyond, but it's just never going to be the same experience if it's not yours. A small reminder and slight insight into the creation of this video. I have been cranking on this script for ages. It has existed in some form or fashion since I completed this game just at the close of 2019. I have typed countless words and erased the vast majority of them. The file I'm reading off of right now isn't even the original file. This document is called Death Stranding Redux, as it is a misshapen Frankenstein made out of the parts of deleted scripts of the past. Every pass-through of this script is met with addendums. Every addition needs another inclusion. No section feels long enough. Truthfully, I'm not sure if any discussion of this game would ever do it the justice I think it deserves, and I'm certainly not the one to give it that justice. What's more, to say that my obsession with this game started after the credits rolled would certainly not be true. The year mentioned at the top of this script, 2016, the day Kojima stepped back into the spotlight, is the moment that Death Stranding fully captured my mind. It hasn't released its grip since. I watched and rewatched those trailers. Sometimes I still do. After completing my initial playthrough of the game, I found my metaphorical belly full. I walked away thinking I had no notes. I genuinely avoided talking about Death Stranding for a long while afterwards, yet it's always been there. It never left me. It has been this package that I have carried with me for almost a decade, and only now am I breaking the seal and attempting to unload its contents. Part of me wonders why I tore so deeply into this video game, and I think I'm beginning to realize why. The reason why I even wanted to begin this project is because I love Death Stranding, and there's a massive chunk of me that wanted to spend hours upon hours of time with it once more. And the longer I stretch this video out, the more I get to discuss about a game I love. Sadly, I think the time has come to let go. It's time to arrive at the conclusion. On its surface, Death Stranding was branded a walking simulator. Any amount of gameplay footage would struggle to shake these allegations. That being said, once someone steps into this world, players would realize just how deep the rabbit hole goes. After witnessing the first several moments of Death Stranding, it would be expected that it's going to be this incredibly story-dense experience. While playing it, I'd imagine that you'd equally come to that same conclusion, with cutscenes that last minutes upon minutes. Those cutscenes contain a cast of characters that continue to contact you at an exhausting frequency to explain, re-explain, and exposition dump to you at every turn. But for as complicated as the plot can be, and as bloated as the details can make it feel, the overall story of Death Stranding is rather simple. After the near extinction of humanity, Americans pulled together, attempting to establish a national network. One man has to brave the harsh and deadly world above ground, connecting small outposts of population in order to make this connected nation a reality. That's pretty much it. Death Stranding feels so complicated though because it has layers, one after another. These layers add depth to our characters. They add purpose to our mission. They create an understanding for the world we inhabit. The layers do not stop at the narrative. Every moment of gameplay is filled with layers of complexity. A player must take into account every sense they possess, every number and word provided, every asset available to their person. Information overload does happen often. Everything from the constant menus upon menus, the text that updates on the side of the screen at a continuous rate throughout every moment of gameplay, and the absolute piles of text the game provides that help flesh out this world and its characters. Emails, journals, even essays written by the more intelligent members of society. The game contains this abundance of knowledge that can very easily become overwhelming, even if you skipped every cutscene, even if you didn't read a single email. Just the game itself is enough to look simplistic on the outset, only to be overbearing the further into it you dive. Every snarky individual who sees this game as simplistic would almost certainly be the type of person to wrestle with it, clumsily careening off of every cliff, eventually slamming the controller in frustration, now claiming the game is too complex. But I do assure you that there is a sort of mastery that comes from playing this game, a mastery of not just button inputs, but mental ones. As the game continues, you discover which pieces of information are worth your attention and which ones you can afford to ignore. While nearly everything contains a particular value, not all of it is relevant relevant to your current situation. At first, it makes sense to find it annoying how much of a sea of information you must wade through to find the parts you need, but eventually you can find a small comfort in the abundance. Death Stranding never reaches a point of simplicity. Every layer of information stacks onto the previous. Every piece of gameplay affects the overall structure in some manner. The fact that you can put up a ladder is huge in the beginning. By the end, you will so rarely see a ladder, let alone consider its usefulness. Not because it's become obsolete, but simply because your arsenal has gotten so much more advanced. The act of walking doesn't necessarily get trivialized, demanding your full attention in the beginning, but becoming second nature by the game's conclusion. Not because it got easier, but because you, as a player, have overcome its complexities. What I find so captivating is how, within several hours of gameplay, the game fully conditioned me to think in a more complex manner, attempting to even describe to someone the series of complicated problems, solutions, and series of buttons pressed in just one given hour would take so long. This video is partial evidence of that. But at some point, you don't even question it all. It becomes so natural and intuitive, like walking, using your hands, and other basic functions we do in real life. It eventually becomes so second nature that we don't even know how to describe the actions themselves. It is a game made of layers. To unpack them would be a fool's errand. This video is evidence of that. For when I speak these words to you, you do not often consider the series of synapses of electricity it requires to make me say those words. You do not fully process the miracle of modern technologies that have allowed me to record, edit, and deliver this recording of my voice to your ears. You do not ponder on the fact that your ears resonate with a vibrating frequency, and your mind performs a series of complicated functions as it begins to interpret those vibrations as being that which forms language, words, and fully formed thoughts. To hear someone break down something we may take for granted can potentially help you in realizing the pieces that assist in this operation, but perhaps it distracts you from the point. For it isn't that which makes up my voice that you should focus on, it is what my voice is saying. Part of me wouldn't be surprised to hear that Death Stranding is considered amongst those games that would be fair to claim takes a couple of tries. On my first playthrough, I felt very confident that I understood the game and had accurately managed to meet it on its level of doing and thinking. Yet on my second and third playthroughs, I noticed just how much more there was to grasp. While I had been incredibly effective before, on the next go around, I found a way to do it a different, much easier way. Occasionally, I realized there were entire systems I had overlooked, and within those systems, I found entire locations I hadn't explored. The first playthrough, I just wanted to complete orders for the sake of reaching credits. The second session, I found myself checking the exact amount of likes I would get for an order, not accepting those that weren't worth the distance and time. The careful consideration I was beginning to apply came from experience and understanding, and those were attributes that I don't really think I would have ever been able to contain on my initial undertaking. All that said, part of me feels kind of silly for sitting here and telling you, no, it's really deep, I swear, because I do contain within me the ability to look at this experience and recognize it for the mailman walking simulator it appears to be. I have the potential to look at it in all its complexities and still claim that it's a goofy game with bizarre concepts that takes itself way too serious most times. I think it'd be so fair if someone played Death Stranding and bounced right off of it. It seems almost tailor-made to be uninviting to the average individual. Yet I don't necessarily think that it's fair to claim that as a reason for criticism. Just because it wasn't your flavor doesn't make the flavor bad. It's just not your flavor. And what's bizarre is that this game, when broken down into its most digestible of parts, is not at all my flavor. This is a game that, if described to me in terms of gameplay, would not move me to want to play it. I'm not even going to say that the story would have drawn me in. In fact, I know the concept of pulling together for the sake of patriotism would have immediately turned me off. But that's kind of the point I'm trying to make. When broken into its parts, Death Stranding is kinda lame. But Death Stranding isn't a pile of parts. It's a constructed work of art. It's a functioning system with mechanics that support its plot, and a plot that supports its progressional mechanics. It's a story that has themes that have underlying and prevalent emotions that motivate characters that move and motivate me. It has scenes that stand out as memorable due to an overwhelming amount of style. It has so much style that you can't deny its power to produce images that just go so unreasonably hard. good. Death Stranding is not the game it appears to be. It's not even the game it is. It's on a level beyond that. It's something indescribable and unobtainable. I truly think you could have given us another 60 years of gaming, and without someone like Kojima being put in the exact situation he was in to lead to him getting fired, being depressed, gathering a team, grabbing his friends, and cracking out this lightning in a bottle video game. Without all that, we would have never gotten a game like this one. I don't feel like I'm a defender of this game because it doesn't need my defense. It speaks, abundantly so, for itself. And there's nothing like it. There may never be anything like it ever again. I don't know how this man does it, but he pushes video games in a direction I want to see them go. He pushes narratives in a way that keeps me invested. He makes art that I want to experience. I have been playing games for a long time. I have been making videos over games for a very short amount of time. In these videos, my goal is not to tell you how I feel about a game. That would imply that I have some sort of expertise or knowledge that would mean something. My intention is to tell you how a particular game made me feel. That is because I am human, a human willing to interact with my favorite form of art and allow it to move me. This fills me with a passion unlike any other, and my desperate desire is to share that passion with others like me, to inspire you to feel even more passion about the things you find passion in, perhaps even to encourage you to likewise share those passions with others. For Death Stranding, I have more than 200 hours of combined playtime split across 4 different versions on 3 different platforms. There has never been a game that has captivated me quite like this one. There has rarely ever been a game that I have invested this much time into. But more importantly to the discussion of today, there has never, and I mean never, been a game that has made me reflect this strongly, to make me look at it with such a thorough microscope, to make me feel so enriched passion for it, to make me care about it from development to production to completion. I think it's quite clear, but perhaps I need to say it out loud. I'm tired of being quiet about it. I love Death Stranding. And after all of this, I'm sure there will be those that think this is a ridiculous conclusion to come to, but after fatiguing myself in order to create this introspection and exhaustive breakdown of one of the most memorable games in modern memory, I re-ask the question, what is Death Stranding? Maybe it doesn't need to be explained in order for it to mean something. Despite this, I think the fact that I did just explain so much of it to the best of my ability means that it must have meant something to me. So I guess the conclusion is something I already knew from the very beginning. Death Stranding isn't a game for everyone, but it is a game for me. A game that reached out at a time where I was willing to receive it. An experience that brought me such a catharsis that I've replayed it several times over. A game with an ending so beautiful that it brings a tear to my eye every time I see it. We aren't talking about a game made for the world. This isn't an experience that connects all players of all philosophies. Death Stranding took a risk, gave it their all, and gave me something that touched my soul. I choose not to look at this game and say that it is outstanding despite its issues. It's outstanding because of them. I end this discussion knowing what I already knew. Even deeper, I now understand my own statement when I affirm to you that Death Stranding is what I've been seeking in video games since I was a child. Death Stranding is everything they say it is, but more than that, it's art. What is Death Stranding? It's hard to say, really, but there's one thing I know for certain. It's one of my all-time favorite games, and an experience that I will carry with me for a very, very long time. Or at least until the sequel comes out. It's finally over. We're gonna do this outro a little differently from usual. I'm gonna make it really quick because I've already held you for long enough. If you've stuck around this far, thank you so much. Thank you for watching all of the video, if you watched all of it. If you just watched the final feelings portion of it, thank you as well. For the record, I'm aware that there is a bunch of frame drops that happen in the video. This is completely my fault. I made a huge mistake while recording, and because I have a mid-tier computer, all footage looks like it is dropping frames while I'm editing, so I was not able to catch this until way late in the editing process, and I gotta get this video out before the sequel, so sadly I had to swallow my pride and just accept that it is what it is. This is the part of the video where I remind you that if you enjoyed all of the hard work I put into this, then a like and a subscribe is very simple, very easy. I will be making more videos. I've got a lot of fun ideas planned, a lot of shorter, fun ideas in the works. Speaking of ideas in the works, over on Patreon, for only as little as $1 a month, you can get access to a bunch of other videos where I yap on about a lot of things. One of the Patreon videos that has been sitting there waiting in the wings for me me to finish Death Stranding is my 2024 favorite things video. So hop on over to the Patreon if you're interested in seeing how that's gonna go. I promise you, you're not going to be able to predict some of my picks. Thank you so much to everyone who has supported me through this time where I felt like I was hitting absolute radio silence, and boy, it was uncomfortable. I perhaps plan on having videos maybe as girthy as this one, but I never, ever, ever want them to take as long as this one, and I don't want there to be a drought like there was while I was working on this for 6 months. Regardless, shout out to the unpaid intern, shout out to all of my Patreon folks. Here they are. And again, if you'd like to be on there, Patreon is the place to be. I'm going to hurry up and take a well-deserved nap. Thank you so much for watching. Catch you down the road. Be excellent to each other.